Oh, let me close my door. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Madness and Mayhem. So this week has been beautiful, as always, and we're going to do it all kind of live for fun. I haven't, so it's been really busy, but I haven't done an entire kind of like I've prepped in advance, and so the reason why we can kind of do this live is because we're going to be revisiting stuff that we've already spoken about like over and over again, but obviously it's back in the news, and I'm going to take you guys on a trip down memory lane, but also get you thinking differently about Fauci, and more importantly the things that people aren't talking about, right? So just to preempt, we have these two bookends of Fauci bookends. We have HIV that we know lots about, and we've got guinea pig kids, and we'll go into that just for those of you who don't know. And then we've got COVID, and kind of the pattern of gain of function, and it's kind of like if you look at HIV and you look at the COVID stuff, they're exactly the same. Now I know we kind of had swine flu in the middle, but that's still a very long portion of time. So what I'm suggesting, considering his pardon is from 2014, it's also not a blanket pardon. So lots of stuff can still be done anyway. But there's potentially an opportunity for anybody who wants to do some digging. Like, I'm not in America. I can't, I have no jurisdiction to go and do FOIs and stuff like that. But there's an opportunity to just look in the middle, right? But in order for us to kind of do things usefully, you have to kind of really understand stuff first. So I know this is probably not making much sense, but once you kind of see the patterns and once you see a behavior, so psychology is all about like behavior patterns, right? And how people behave, and you can make predictions based on past experiences. However, if somebody has done lots of personal development work, or maybe they were traumatized before and now they've dealt with the trauma, the way that they show up and way that they behave is going to be completely different. So nobody is 100%, like, you can't completely predict exactly what somebody's going to do ever, right? However, we can have a good idea, and the fact that when you look at like the way that HIV shit played out and the way that COVID played out, and then we know there's going to be similar things in between that maybe open up the scope for obviously proper arrests, prison, convictions, all of those things, but also maybe help people understand COVID, because people have a if you mention COVID, like still now, right? Still now, if you mention the fact that it has been proven beyond reasonable doubt that the Rona was not like accidental. Like, so back in 2020, and I will probably get kicked off the internet again for saying all this shit, but back in 2020, you got removed from the internet for saying this stuff, right? Now, it's been proven 100%. It's on the origin of COVID on the White House website, right? So, we'll have a look at that in a second. But that's not in the media. Like, we have the dog and pony show of Fauci like pleading the fifth. Like, he's allowed, right? Why wouldn't he? Like, if you like, I'm sorry, but if you were like an evil person and you've like been behind multiple hundreds of millions of people's harmed, like deaths, like you're not gonna own up to it. Like, I don't understand why everybody was so like, oh my god, like, what did people expect? He was just gonna sit there and be like, oh yep, 100%, yep, I did all of that shit, yep. Take me to prison. Like, I don't understand like people's like shock by this. But anyway, so I have done a psych profile. I'm just going to kind of frame the things that have been uploaded into Grok Advanced. So while I haven't kind of like run through, and we will kind of like run through stuff live, there are things that I have uploaded in advance. So just to pre-frame what has been uploaded is the Dr. Elias Thorne psychological profile. And should you want to do a psychological profile on any public person, use the GitHub link that's in the description. It's completely free. The analysis kind of software prompt thing, completely free for you to access. And if you're currently battling a school or an institution, then there's another piece of software for you to make sure your kids are being looked after. Right? Not software, sorry, like prompts that will go through like the stuff that we do. So you can use those. So I've got a psych profile, but I've also got the Dr. Martin kind of Fauci files that everybody forgets. Dr. Martin did one in 2024. Was it 2024? Shite, I've lost it. It's already been uploaded though, so it's fine. I'm pretty sure it's 2024. Fuck-a-doodle-do. Everybody's like, people are so annoying is probably the easiest way for me to state my frustration. So while they swiped a lot of stuff from my computer, the COVID-19 and Fauci dossier by David E. Martin, that was done like as a legal case filing. Oh, why haven't I got a date on it? I don't know. Can I see? I don't know. Well, that's 205 pages. So that was around. Hey, thank you. Hey, Jean. So that was around. I've also uploaded I will share my screen. So the White House document, which is over 500 pages. The 557 pages. This is the coronavirus pandemic after action review of the COVID-19 pandemic. Uploaded the psych profile. So there's documents already kind of in Grok, ready for us to kind of fight the urge of Grok to go onto Wikipedia, because I have not heard any of my family members, right? Okay, so you will know that this information's penetrated through to mainstream because your family members who took the vaccines, who were dumb enough to wear masks perpetually, who skipped like life because of it, will be ranting via like some kind of text message or WhatsApp or whatever you're using. That hasn't happened, which means even though the White House has done this entire webpage called like Lab Leak, the true origins of COVID-19, it's still quiet. But funny enough, it kind of came out at the same time that we had the whole Spanish invasion, and everyone forgets why the Inquisition started. We didn't. We know because we've been talking about that for ages. Let me show my screen. So this is what the White House put out, and obviously none of your family members are talking about it, which means it is being covered up, right? That's the whole point. So we've got the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials and the media to discredit the lab leak theory, was prompted by Dr. Fauci to push the preferred narrative that COVID-19 originated naturally. Number one, the virus possesses a biological characteristic that's not found in nature. And for anybody wondering what that is, it is the graphene scene, right? So remember, coronavirus, not COVID-19, is coronavirus, which is a cold, plus HIV. And there were 5 different strains of HIV found, all of which are patented to NIAID, Moderna, like the organizations which were involved in kind of like funding the gain of function research in the Wuhan lab, right? So, and all of that information has been out in the ether for like 6 years, right? So it's the graphene seam. So the fact that we have two different types of virus like stuck together like glue. And for those of you who kind of maybe haven't been on this journey with me, near Porton Down. So Porton Down is the like L4 biolab. It's kind of where we do all of our weapons research in the UK. Near to Porton Down, there was something called the Common Cold Unit. This is back in the like 50s and 60s, like Cold War times. And in the Common Cold Unit, there was over 20,000 veterans that went through. And not all veterans, like people were like, they had to go there as part of their active duty, right? They had to spend like 6 weeks in the Common Cold Unit where they were all tested on. And this is all like, again, documented, heavily documented. And there they were weaponizing coronavirus. And back in 2020, 2021, the actual strain of coronavirus which was used as part of COVID-19 was backtracked to the Common Cold Unit. So that wasn't novel in itself. The actual strain of coronavirus was backtracked to the Common Cold Unit in the United Kingdom, and that information was published in the British Medical Journal. Again, all of this is like out there documented. Graphene, which obviously was being rapidly produced by China because China bought out the company that figured out how to do it. I don't know whether I talked about this. Did I talk about this on the show, or did I just dig into it and talk about it with somebody? Anyway, so a company figured out how to do it, and then China bought them out, right? So which is strange, but they did. And then HIV was obviously created in the 60s and 70s and released in the 70s, right? So none of those things occurred naturally by themselves. They definitely don't occur naturally stuck together with the graphene, right? So that there was no way it was natural. And very early chatter in 2020, like I'm talking like January, February, when people were dissecting what coronavirus, like COVID-19 was, people were saying this is not natural. It is not zootonic. So zootonic means it's like kind of come from the animals to the humans. Like it just isn't, right? And so what they did was they obviously, when they were creating the vaccines, when they were releasing, they just really released the genetic sequence, right? People didn't have the live vaccine. People didn't have the live virus to create the vaccines, right? They used Craig Ventner's machine, which I can't remember the name. It's called like the DBT, and it literally just prints a vaccine based on a genetic sequence. So they used the genetic sequence they were given by the WHO, which were given by China, right? Which they obviously created in the Wuhan lab. I mean, with the Wuhan people having coronavirus-like symptoms back in August, and so they created it. There was a lab leak. It wasn't the first time it happened. We mentioned this before. Back in 2013, there was a SARS-like leak, and that's when they actually tested Craig Ventner and his partner's machine the first time round, and only 32 people were harmed. Everybody was vaccinated and it was contained. But remember, they didn't do that this time because they kept it quiet. They kept it on the down low. Didn't tell anyone what was going on, but there was kind of underground chatter that people were realizing there was something going on, there was something emerging, and everybody was staying quiet about it. So it was purposely allowed, right? This is the key. It was purposely allowed to mutate and travel around the world Christmas time, and Chinese shoppers go all over the world to go shopping. Oh, sorry. So it was purposely allowed to mutate and infect the entire world, which everybody's forgetting. This is really important. And it was only the end of January, did the World Health Organization go, maybe we need to do something about this? But don't panic, right? So remember, the original conversation was it's not transferable from person to person, because they were actually talking about it like underground, like back channels, medical back channels, like October, November 2019. And then the WHO was saying it's non-transmissible, you're just like making shit up, don't talk about that shit. And it was all hush-hushed, right? Which is a long time for something which is contagious, i.e. a cold, to circulate, right? Which is why people like me got very ill December, January. And the first person who died from coronavirus in the United Kingdom was the 19th of January 2020, right? So before it was cool. That's the coroner. So it was like in January 2020. So it didn't just appear March, April. However, there was a spike in deaths when we locked down and we stopped treating people, right? So what was going on January, February, March was there was this weird flu. Like everybody's having this weird flu and it was being treated properly. So I had antibiotics for my entire body was like shutting down and riddled with infection. Like it was just like it was so disgusting. It was literally I'm sorry, but this is what happened. My eardrums burst and the infection was it was just vile. And I was deaf in one ear for like 6 weeks. I couldn't even hear out of my ear because it just like burst my eardrums. It was awful. And so there was a weird flu, and because there was a weird flu, people were getting medications and people were recovering from it. And then when people decided it was coronavirus in the UK specifically, the NHS said they can't have antibiotics because it's not bacterial, it's viral. However, I had an infection because of it. So the knock-on effect was lots of people were then getting infections because it was just destroying their immune system. And if you don't treat the infection, people will die. The other thing, for those of you who forgot what happened in the UK, is you were told not to go to the doctors, not to go to the hospital, to kind of manage it at home, right? Like I was young, fit and healthy. Now, bearing in mind I had just recovered from the flu. So like I had the flu, 3 days okay, and then and I still stand by. It was also circulated in the flu jabs that were going out November, December in the United Kingdom. So I would love somebody to like be able to kind of look into that. But because shedding, right? Because I'm relatively healthy and I went and saw people for Christmas and then I was ill, like really fucking ill. Anyway, so back onto this. So it's not found in nature, it just isn't. Data shows that all COVID-19 cases stem from a single introduction into humans. This runs contrary to previous pandemics where there were multiple spillover events. And let's not forget there was different groups, right? So we had COVID A, COVID B, and COVID C. And they all kind of just like magically popped up like in different places. And as though somebody went, inject this one here, inject this one here, inject this one here. And they were separate. Like you didn't have like a mix of A, B, and C. You had like A was over here, B like completely different countries, right? So all these things people have forgotten. It was only six years ago. Wuhan's home to China's former SARS research lab and has a history of conducting gain-of-function research, gene altering and organism supercharging at inadequate biosafety levels. So remember, they were given 2015 contracts to do this. There's literally the lady who was kind of like leading the research, who was called the Bat Lady. So I'm just giving you a summary of all the information that I remember, which will be contained in the files that I've given to Grok, right? So just for those of you who haven't ever really looked into this, or maybe you tried and the internet was wiped before you had a chance to do it. So the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but let's not forget that it was done in partnership with the University of North Carolina. So this was not done just in China. And this is also something I've been saying since 2020 when, you know, lots of people in America were like, oh, we need to sue China. I was like, you're suing yourself, love, because you're the ones who fucking funded it. You're the ones who were doing it and you just outsourced it to China. because the rules changed, right? So Wuhan Institute of Virology researchers were sick with COVID-like symptoms in the fall of 2019. Like I said, it was August, months before COVID-19 was discovered at the wet market. There was also kind of rumors circulating, people suggesting that it was released at the Wuhan Games. So do you remember there was the military games that people were already reporting weird flu-like symptoms after that? Potentially. And then we have, by nearly all measures of science, if there was evidence of a natural origin, it would have already surfaced, but it hasn't. So this is the market. I don't know why it's pulsing. It's a little bit weird. There's 7.5 miles between the market and the Institute of Virology. It's not far. So proximal origin publications. The proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 publication, which was used repeatedly by public health officials and the media to discredit the lab leak theory, was prompted by Dr. Fauci to push the preferred narrative that COVID-19 originated in nature. Gain-of-function research. A lab-related incident involving gain-of-function research is the most likely origin of COVID-19. Current government mechanisms for overseeing this dangerous gain-of-function research are incomplete, severely convoluted, and lack global applicability. EcoHealth Alliance. So under the leadership of Dr. Peter Daszak, used US taxpayer dollars to facilitate dangerous gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China. After the select subcommittee released evidence of EcoHealth violating the terms of its NIAID grant, the US Department of Health and Human Services commenced official debarment proceedings and suspended all funding to EcoHealth. New evidence also shows that the Department of Justice has opened an investigation into EcoHealth's pandemic-era activities. Let's not forget that Moderna patented... Didn't they patent their vaccine? Or was it Pfizer? Pfizer, so if you looked at the CDC's vaccine tracking thing, you'd see vaccine injuries from 2019, like COVID-19 vaccine. So before they were like produced, right? Before the pandemic had been released. Moderna also patented something. I think they patented the HIV strains. I think that was the strains of HIV. So because the HIV strains that we used were Moderna's patented ones. So NIH failures. NIH procedures for funding and overseeing potentially dangerous research are deficient, unreliable, and pose a serious threat to both public and national security. Further, NIH fostered an environment that promoted evading federal record-keeping laws, as seen through the actions of Dr. David Morenz and FOI lady Marge Moore. And David Morenz has been indicted. Right, so he is one of Fauci's top guys. He has been indicted, in case you missed that one. So he did have a full and unconditional pardon for any offences against the US. Okay, so interesting. So just offences against the US. So maybe, I mean, I don't know how countries can go about suing other countries. Because people tried multiple times to go to the International Criminal Court, and I don't agree with that, right? I don't agree with the ICC as a governing body. I don't think there should be a global governing body. I think it should all be at state level. And I know people are very, would like Mandani should have was trying to get Netanyahu arrested for war crimes. That's. It shouldn't be like countries shouldn't. There shouldn't be a body which decides what happened in the country. It should happen at state level, but states, as in countries, have kind of done stuff to other countries before. And I mean, I don't mean like invade America, or China. But there's precedent for holding them account, right? This is, it was American tax dollars, the American state that funded and created, and it was the WHO should be disbanded completely because they actively covered it up, right? That chain of evidence will be there with Tedros and China. And China covered it up as well. So I don't know. There must be something that we could do somehow. Okay, so HHS obstruction. Well, I'm more likely to be able to do it now that we're allowed to fucking talk about it. Right, maybe. So the Biden administration, HHS, engaged in multi-year campaign of delay, confusion, and non-responsiveness in an attempt to obstruct the Select Committee's investigation, hide evidence that could incriminate or embarrass senior public health officials. It appears that HHS even intentionally under-resourced its component that responds to legislative oversight requests. EcoHealth obstruction. EcoHealth President Dr. Peter Daszak obstructed the Select Subcommittee's investigation by providing publicly available information, instructing staff to reduce the scope and pace of productions, and doctoring documents before releasing them to the public. Further, Dr. Daszak provided false statements to Congress. Dr. Dr. David Moran's, the guy who's been indicted, deliberately obstructed the subcommittee's investigation, likely lied to Congress on multiple occasions, unlawfully deleted federal COVID-19 records, and shared non-public information about NIAID grant processes with EcoHealth President Dr. Peter Daszak. New York's executive chamber, led presently by Governor Kathy Hochul, redacted documents, offered numerous illegitimate privilege claims, and withheld thousands of documents without an apparent legal basis to obstruct the Select Subcommittee's investigation into former Governor Cuomo's pandemic-era failures. World Health Organization, the WHO's response to the COVID-19 pandemic was an abject failure because it caved to pressure from the Chinese Communist Party and placed China's political interests ahead of its international duties. Further, the WHO's newest effort to solve the problems that exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic via the pandemic treaty may harm the United States. Social distancing, the 6 feet apart social distancing recommendation, which shut down schools and small businesses across the country, was arbitrary and not based on science. During closed-door testimony, Dr. Fauci testified that the guidance just sort of appeared. Mask mandates, there was no conclusive evidence that masks effectively protected Americans from COVID-19. Public health officials flip-flopped on the efficacy of masks without providing Americans scientific data, causing a massive uptick in public distrust. And not only public distrust, hey, Edwin, how many people were harmed due to the masks, right? Do you remember those? They sent masks off to that lab in Florida, and they had like horrific bacteria on that were just like toxic. Like, I mean, like, you need to deal with this because it's like lethal. I'm pretty sure the one young child's mask had like legit lethal levels of toxic bacteria on. Lockdowns, prolonged lockdowns cause immeasurable harm not only to the American economy, but also the mental and physical health of Americans, with a particularly negative effect on younger citizens. Rather than prioritizing the protection of the most vulnerable populations, federal and state government policies forced millions of Americans to forgo crucial elements of a healthy and financially sound life. Former New York Governor New York failures. Andrew Cuomo's March 25th order, which forced nursing homes to accept COVID-19 positive patients, was medical malpractice. Evidence shows that Mr. Cuomo and his administration worked to cover up the tragic aftermath of their policy decisions in an apparent effort to shield themselves from accountability. And that's what was happening here in the UK, right? It was happening in Birmingham, for sure. It probably happened in Manchester under the now Prime Minister's watch. Evidence suggests Mr. Cuomo knowingly and willingly made false statements to the Select Committee on numerous occasions about material aspects of New York's COVID-19 nursing home disaster and the ensuing cover-up. The Select Subcommittee referred Mr. Cuomo to the DOJ for criminal prosecution. Interesting. COVID-19 misinformation. Public health officials often misled the American people through conflicting messaging, knee-jerk reactions, and lack of transparency. Most egregiously, the federal government demonized alternative treatments and disfavored narratives such as the lab leak theory in a shameful effort to coerce and control the American people's health decisions. That is a really powerful statement. Like, they've just admitted that the the federal government, so they've just admitted fault. Right, we need to screenshot that. That is the government stating they coerced and controlled the American people's health decisions. And it's not just American, right? Remember, what was being said in America was being parroted across the rest of the world. What was happening at the CDC was informing the decisions of the what used to be Public Health England. I don't want, it's fucking the Health Security Agency now, whatever it's changed its name to. So it was informing those decisions, and Europe, right? So the Europe, whatever they call themselves, not the EU, but I mean, they had that special medical board. So it was specifically what was being said in America and disseminated in America was filtering down and directing what was happening in other countries, and the WHO as well together, both of them. It's like 30 degrees here today. It's fucking hot. So when those efforts failed, the Biden administration resorted to outright censorship, coercion, and colluding with the world's largest social media companies to censor all COVID-19 related dissent. Yep, been there. I was, and again, okay, so just to reiterate, anybody who was able to grow their audience by talking negatively about COVID, like funeral directors, people who were on social media who then were allowed to kind of get places, become journalists and reporters on places like GB News or Fox or places like that, and saw their social media follower counts rise. You need to really question whether they're actually independent and working for you, or whether they are part of the controlled opposition. So I mean, just throwing that out there again, right? Just throwing that out there again. Okay, so now, oh fiddle, I have got the psychological profile, and then we will go and dive into the pattern, right? So what we're doing is we're doing pattern recognition. We will look at the HIV patterns, things that they did, right? Perhaps things that we haven't uncovered they've done with COVID, how COVID kind of went through, played out, Fauci's involvement, for those of you who don't know, and then we will try and figure out, so then we'll run the HIA, and to see if there's what the likely thing we're missing is, right? If that's okay with everybody. Because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to talk about Fauci, and I was like, I don't know, I don't want to just talk this. I mean, I never want to do the same thing that everybody else is doing. And it just occurred to me that people aren't talking about the middle, right? If history repeats and COVID's a repeat of HIV, what was going on in the middle? And or what things are people missing about COVID, which were evident in HIV? Which might predate 2014. But again, it's not a blanket ban anyway. So that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to change what you can see. Share this tab instead. Oh, and I will need to zoom in. Can you see that? Yeah. Okay, so, and remember, this gives us a trustworthiness index, and this isn't whether we should trust Fauci or not. This is whether we can trust him to do what he says he's going to do. based on the information that we know about him. So again, it's kind of limited with what we have public access to, but he has been in the public eye for a large portion of time. So that should give us an opportunity to kind of see a little bit into his insights, but it won't give us everything. But also we do have to kind of dissect people with caution, because a lot of the time these guys, they're given speeches, right? So they're not saying stuff off their own bat. They're told what to say. They have script writers, they have speech writers. Like a lot, they don't. It's not like we're kind of catching them in conversation. And even when they're appearing on, podcasts and back in the day news channels, a lot of the time they knew in advance what they were going to be asked. So whenever you're watching podcasts, by the way, lots of the time people do tell people in advance what they're going to be asked, what they're going to be talking about, so people can prepare, which I think is like lazy podcasting. Like if you're going to be a guest and like a guest expert about your chosen field, like you shouldn't need to know in advance what you're going to be asked, like at all. I mean, you might get more ahs and likes, but if you know enough, you should be able to answer some questions, right? I think it's like when I was doing podcast, I need to start doing podcasts again though, because obviously like I keep getting my business shut down, and it's quite stressful. But when I was doing them before, like people would say, oh, I'll send you through the questions. I was like, oh no, please don't send me through the questions, because like then I will think about what I'm going to say, and then it won't be natural, it won't be real, it won't be a conversation. I will be trying to steer it back to the talking points I have in my head, and that's not going to necessarily be a good conversation. Like if you watch 4 podcasts with the same person, you shouldn't be getting like the exact same script every single time, right? And do you do that? Like, have you seen that? And I know I'm going off on a tangent, like this is but if you see that, right, and sometimes you're watching and you say, oh, I like this person, I'll go watch them on XYZ as well, and then you're like, this is the exact same fucking conversation. Even though the podcast host is asking them different questions, they're saying the exact same thing. They've got everything, it's just memorized and scripted. Like it's just poor performance. Like if you know what you're talking about, you should be able to fucking freestyle. Anyway, so Anthony Stephen Fauci was born December 24, 1940. So he was born while the war was raging on. Brooklyn, New York. He is now 85. He is the son of first-generation Italian-American parents. His father, Stephen, was a pharmacist, owned a neighborhood pharmacy in Bensonhurst, and young Anthony helped deliver prescriptions by bicycle. He grew up Catholic in a working-class environment that emphasized hard work and service. He attended the Jesuit Regis High School in Manhattan. Interesting. Captain of the basketball team, despite being a midget at 5 inches and 5'7" inches, not 5 inches. He's not a borrower. 5'7" inches. Then the College of the Holy Cross, a BA in Classics, pre-med track, 1962. Graduated first in his class from Cornell University Medical College in 1966. Completed his internship in residency in international medicine, New York Hospital Cornell Medical Center. He joined the National Institutes of Health, NIH, in 1968 as a clinical associate in the of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, and he rose rapidly. Headed the clinical physiology section, 1974, chief of the Laboratory of Immunoregulation, 1980. So just highlight that there. That was interesting. Director of NIAID from 1984 until his retirement at the end of 2022. A 38 to 39-year tenure spanning 6 presidential administrations. He's married to Christine Grady, a nurse and bioethicist, and has 3 daughters. Biologically, he's demonstrated exceptional stamina, long working hours running into later life, and longevity. Though Adrenochrome. Maybe. Psychologically, the combination of immigrant family work ethic, rigorous Jesuit education, academic excellence, and decades of the apex of federal biomedical power appears to have fostered a highly driven, control-orientated, and status-conscious personality that grows values, scientific authority, institutional power, and public recognition. Socially, growing up in a service-orientated Italian-American household, and then navigating elite medical and political circles, reinforcing a worldview centered on hierarchical expertise, public service as a personal achievement, and the management of both science and public perception. What drives him is the exercise of scientific and institutional influence at the highest levels, rooted in early ambition, sustained by long-term positional power, and intensified by the attention that came with successive national crises. Bit of a God complex going on here. Scan analysis. Okay, so review of major public statements across decades with particular focus on COVID era congressional testimony, interviews in the 2026 Senate hearing in which he repeatedly invoked the Fifth Amendment. Language is polished, authoritative, and frequently uses hedging, redefinition of terms, especially gain of function, and appeals to institutional processes. We have committees, the science. Always makes me chuckle. Repetition of I've always been transparent based on the data, keeping an open mind, serves emphasis. Specificity is high when defending institutional decisions and low or shifting when addressing contradiction. So mass guidance changes, origins of COVID, funding of research at Wuhan Institute of Virology. In later hearings, he moved from detailed engagement to complete refusal under the Fifth Amendment. Patterns show a consistent need to control the narrative, frame and protect institutional and personal reputation. Ooh, deception congruency score is 58 out of 100. That ain't looking good, Mr. Fauci. Words maintain a narrative of pure science and public service, but show repeated mismatches with documented changes in public guidance, internal emails, diary entries revealing enjoyment of fame, and the decision to invoke the Fifth Amendment rather than answer under oath in 2026. Justification. High verbal skill and institutional framing produce polished statements, yet the cumulative pattern of shifting positions, redefinition of key terms, and eventual non-cooperation significantly reduces overall congruency with a fully transparent scientific record. Action-based behavioral proof. So long-term, so these are the successes. Long-term scientific leadership transformed the NIAID into a major force during the HIV/AIDS research and treatment, played a central role in the development of antiretroviral therapy, which, you know, killed loads of people. Later COVID vaccinating platforms, again, later killed loads of people, aligned to claims of dedication to infectious disease science. Institutional longevity survived and thrived under 6 presidents while retaining the directorship, consistent with political and bureaucratic skill. Public communication during crisis became the most visible face of the US pandemic response for many Americans, much as the self-presentation as the reliable scientific voice. Failures and mismatches. Guidance shifts. So early public statements against routine mask wearing, later reversed. 6 feet distancing, later described as not based on rigorous science. Herd immunity thresholds adjusted in ways he later acknowledged involved messaging considerations. Mismatches and pure follow the science rhetoric. Origins research funding publicly downplayed the lab leak hypothesis, while internal communications and later testimony showed early concern. Repeated redefinition of gain of function while denying NIH-funded research of that type at Wuhan creates significant gaps between public statements and documented record. Why doesn't anybody ever mention the University of North Carolina, right? It was in the very original, I don't know where it is, as in like I had it, but I don't know where it's gone. The original investigation, which was done in 2020, 2021. 2026 congressional appearance invoked the Fifth Amendment repeatedly rather than answer questions under oath after years of asserting complete transparency, a major behavioral shift from earlier cooperative posture. But to be fair, if his lawyers told him, don't you dare answer any feckin' questions, he probably is just doing what he's told. Just getting rid of this little bot person. Diary and private communications. Entries expressing pleasure of fame and influence contrast with the public self-presentation of pure selfless service. Actions demonstrate exceptional institutional power and scientific productivity, but also a pattern of narrative control, strategic ambiguity on controversial topics, and eventual legal self-protection when under sustained scrutiny. The human behavior synthesis. So, Dr. Fauci's leadership style is authoritative, media fluent, and highly protective of institutional and personal reputation. He approaches complex scientific and political environments with the skill of a long-term bureaucratic operator. He cultivates relationships across administrations, frames issues in ways that preserve his centrality, and adapts messaging to the political moment. Under pressure, he first engages and explains, then redefines terms, and ultimately withdraws behind legal protections when the cost of engagement becomes too high. Decision-making blends genuine scientific expertise with acute awareness of power, perception, and self-preservation. Strengths include extraordinary endurance, the ability to translate complex science for public and political audiences. Again, but that probably isn't him. That will be the scriptwriter and the speechwriter. And decades of consistent institutional focus on infectious disease. Blind spots include over-identification of personal and institutional reputation with the science, difficulty acknowledging error or uncertainty in real time, and a tendency to treat legitimate scientific or political challenge as a personal attack. In everyday terms, he behaves like the highly successful, long-tenured scientific administrator who became a national symbol, effective at wielding influence and managing crises, yet increasingly protective and less transparent as scrutiny intensified. Okay, implications and predictions. Short term, 6 to 12 months, continued legal and political pressure, possible contempt proceedings or further state level inquiries, limited public appearances. Medium term, 1 to 3 years, legacy battles will intensify as more documents, emails, and diaries surface. Historical assessments of COVID decision making will remain polarized. Long term, 3+ years, will be remembered as both a major figure in HIV/AIDS research and the most polarizing public health official COVID era. Balanced view. Substantial scientific and institutional achievements coexist with documented patterns of strategic ambiguity, messaging management, and eventual non-cooperation under oath. So his trustworthiness index is 55 out of 100. Credit for long scientific career and early HIV work. Significantly reduced by repeated public-private mismatches, research funding guidance changes, 2026 invocation of the Fifth Amendment. Reliable as a high-level scientific administrator with deep domain knowledge. Approach with caution on any claim requiring full transparency about decision-making processes, messaging strategy, or potential conflicts between institutional interest and open scientific inquiry. So what does that mean? So it basically means he's like got short, angry man syndrome. No, okay. So, which, I mean, just so you know, is like an actual thing, right? So basically he loves himself a lot. He thinks of himself as somebody who can do no wrong. He won't acknowledge mistakes, right? So he has an idea, he has a plan, and he will see it through. And then if he gets caught doing whatever he's doing for nefarious reasons or for money or for whatever reason he's doing it, he will just pretend it didn't happen. So that's Fauci in a nutshell. So we can't trust. You can trust Fauci about as much as you can trust a coin toss. So you could literally have a Fauci coin, right? Heads, he's telling the truth. Tails, he's not. And every time he speaks, you can just flip the coin, and the coin will predict. It will be as predictive with regards to what's coming out of his mouth, right? That's how untrustworthy he is. And again, trustworthiness is with regards to he's going to do what he says rather than you can trust him. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, he's a good it's not asking about like a good person. It's just like whether what he says he will follow through on, and or how he's presented himself to the world you can believe, right? So Fauci's untrustworthy, which is cool. So now what I'm going to get Grok to do is, okay, so let's start. So first, off. Please run a HIV timeline, including the Vera findings, as though we know nothing. Tom, actually. Okay. The sad thing is, like, all of this information, I would have been able to just pull up my injunction stuff, but it got wiped, so that's frustrating. Shit happens. It is what it is. Okay. I still remember quite a bit. So this became like a proper scandal, right? But obviously it all came out late. And what's going on, for those of you who don't know, in the UK, we're still kind of just finishing off the blood scandal. So that is when HIV infected blood was given to people with hemophilia. But what was actually killing them was not the blood, right? The things that was actually killing them was the ADT, which was the medication that they did an entire psyop around, using the gay community who were protesting, demanding it. And then the NIAID were like, oh, you can't have it, NIAID, sorry, you can't have it. And they demanded this ADT, and then they all started fucking dropping dead from it, right? Let's see whether that's in here. So what was going on, if you didn't know back then. So I mean, I was 1981. I wasn't even here. Wasn't even alive. 1984, I was like maybe a year old, depending on when it was happening. So the AIDS, so 1981, 1984. So just as Fauci took over, remember we saw is like when he was taking over the immunology, chief of the Laboratory of Immunoregulation, 1980, then director of NIAID from 1984, right? So he is like chief boss at the time this shit goes down. Shit is orchestrated. Also, for those of you who missed it, there was two people who supposedly found HIV at exactly the same time. There's a whole argument over who really found it. Let me just do that first. Please go into the argument about who discovered HIV, like one French dude and one American. Thanks. This is important because the guy who I'm pretty sure the French guy who died in 2023, 24 basically came out and said that it was all staged or faked. COVID was faked, and he went back on so much stuff, and then he just randomly died, of course. So here we go. Pasteur Institute, Luc Montagnier. There we go. So 1983, they isolated the new retrovirus from a patient with swollen lymph nodes. They called it LAV, lymphoadenopathy associated virus. They published their findings in Science on the 20th of May 1983. So yeah, I wasn't born yet then. And this is now universally accepted, the first isolation of what we call HIV. However, in April 1984, so a year and a bit later, Robert Gallo announced they'd isolated the virus causing AIDS and named it HTLV-123, right? They published 4 papers in Science, with the US Health Security Secretary Margaret Heckler had a high-profile press conference declaring they'd found the cause of AIDS, and a blood test patent was filed and later granted to the US side. And Carrie Mullins, who, funnily enough, died 2019, who would have had a lot to say about the way that they use the PCR test, because he's the one who fucking created it, who also said that you can't use the PCR to test for HIV or for coronavirus-based things, because it can't distinguish between those things. And he actually said you couldn't tell whether somebody had HIV or they were pregnant. Right? Literally, there was 73 things, between 70 and 80 things, which it actually can't distinguish between. And the only way to get it to distinguish between it is by like ramping up the cycles. By the time you ramp up the cycles, you're then looking at things that aren't actually infectious. It is so like it just doesn't work. So he worked for Fauci for a little bit. And he was questioning where the proof was that HIV caused AIDS, because there's never been any actual proof. Robert Gallo, did this entire press conference. They did their stuff, and they just said it did, but they never proved it, right? They said they did. They said they had, but they never actually proved it. And then it just became the thing, right? So it's like me saying, right, the sky's gone green, and earlier today I put some like a green dye in my pond water, and that's it. Like I created the green sky, like, because I did that thing. Like I created it. Like they did a thing, they found a thing, and they said it created AIDS. Like they never actually proved it. There is no science to prove HIV causes AIDS, right? It just became a thing that everybody knew, but it was never proven. And that's what Carrie Mullins would say all the time. And obviously, Fauci would never fucking go toe to toe with him because he kept asking him. And but that's that. So Luc Montagnier, he was out saying COVID was biowarfare. He was saying that he got lots of stuff wrong with HIV, and AIDS and all of that stuff. So he kind of like went like reverted on a lot of them, and then he just like magically died. Because he was a big name to flip, right? The guy who is the official founder of HIV. And why is HIV important, right? Remember, COVID-19 is coronavirus plus HIV with the graphene thing. So HIV is important. So the timeline of the drug trials. So this is how this feeds into Fauci's psyche a little bit more, and maybe if you didn't know this stuff, you'll realize why they just didn't give a shit that people are dying. They just don't care. And I would like to maybe like take you further back to the Red Cross nurses in Nazi Germany, who were the first medical individuals to sign up to the Nazi Party, who were ecstatic at the thought of leaving babies outside in the cold to freeze to death because it was a cheaper method of getting rid of them, right? They absolutely adored the buses of the old and the infirm coming to them for help, thoroughly enjoyed watching them starve to death. However, we're becoming increasingly frustrated by the bed blocking that was happening due to the length of time it takes for somebody to actually starve to death. Right. And all of this is fucking documented. Right. If you've never looked into the Red Cross nurses, and the Red Cross were caught by the Allies smuggling weapons, chemical weapons and biological weapons out of Germany once, Germany had fallen, in their lorries so that they could then continue. Like they were fully indoctrinated while on it. So anybody thinking about nurses necessarily being good people and just assuming that, like, it is the power over life and death. Like in the same way the police service is going to attract people who love the idea of like being in charge and dictating life events, so does nursing, so does being a doctor. Like most doctors and most surgeons have God complexes, right? So like we think of this as being a caring profession, It doesn't mean all the people who go into it, like, actually give a shit. Some of them are just fucking evil, and it's access, right? If you are not a good person, and you enjoy causing harm, lots of people do, right? It's not just one random serial killer. Lots of people enjoy causing harm. They will go where they can get access to the victims, like the same as a pedophile, right? If you are interested in sexual deviancy with minors, you are not going to go work in an old people's home. I mean, and if you're a good person, maybe you will. Maybe you will just like extract yourself from any kind of young people, which, you know, some people do. Some people do. However, the people who enjoy it and want to act on it, they are going to be the school, like cleaners, janitor, and the DBS check only catches people who've been convicted, right? Not people, like, it doesn't do a like sexual preference test, like, at all, right? So you're going to go where you need to go. So Fauci, I mean, he was Catholic, Jesuit school, grew up 1940s. They were doing lots of bad stuff to children. Is he a traumatized child who then, who knows? I've not asked him, but he is not a caring individual. So, and you're about to find out. So in 1981, 1984, the AIDS epidemic emerges in the US. By the mid-1980s, hundreds of children, mostly born to HIV-positive mothers, are infected each year. No antiretroviral drugs are approved for pediatric use. 1984, Anthony Fauci is appointed director of the NIAID. He remains in the post until the end of 2022. Right? He had a fucking stranglehold on that. Late 1980s, with no approved treatments for children, NIAID and the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development began funding pediatric clinical trials of experimental HIV drugs, including AZT and later multi-drug combinations. New York City Administration for Children's Services, ACS, develops a policy allowing HIV-positive foster children to be enrolled in these trials. 1989, Incarceration Children's Center, ICC, opens in Washington Heights, Manhattan. It is a residential facility for HIV-positive children run in association with the Archdiocese of New York and Columbia University. Many of the children placed there are in foster care. ICC becomes one of the main sites for the pediatric trials. And these pediatric trials include injecting children with experimental drugs and just seeing what happens. The foster parents knew, the actual parents didn't know a lot of the time, right? The foster parents were being paid. And again, lots of foster people are not good people, right? They also did it on orphans. They were testing. So this is why they got nicknamed the guinea pig kids, right? They just blanket experimented on children. So 1988 to 2001, 2005, approximately 465 to 532 New York City foster children participate in clinical trials or observational studies related to HIV and AIDS treatment. Trials include safety, tolerance, and toxicity studies of single drugs and later combination cocktails. Some children are enrolled in phase 1, phase 2 studies. Federal regulations require additional protections, including independent advocates, when the wards of the state are used in research involving more than minimal risk. 2004, investigative reports, including work by Liam Schiff and New York Post articles, raised public concerns. Allegations center on the use of foster children as experimental subjects, incomplete consent, and the toxicity of the drugs being tested. The BBC later airs the documentary The Guinea Pig Kids. So this is back when the BBC wasn't as corrupt, although, you know, at the same time they were doing fucking Jimmy Savile shit. So 2005, New York City's Administration for Children's Services commissions an independent review by the Vera Institute of Justice January 2009, Vera Institute of Justice report. The Vera Institute examines the records of 532 New York foster children who participated in clinical trials or observational studies between the late 1980s and mid 2000s. Key findings: 80 of the 532 children died while in foster care. 25 of those deaths occurred while the child was enrolled in a medication trial. Vera's medical staff concluded that none of the deaths were caused directly by the clinical trial medication. I mean, when I looked into the people who were on the Vera trial, that was really kind of suspect, right? Who were on like the investigation committees and where the money was going. But so because it's been, like what happens in the UK, we investigated. There's nothing to see here. The same as what our COVID inquiry said. Oh, yep, there's nothing wrong, nothing to see here. So the same shit happened. Most of the 25 children already had multiple advanced AIDS-related complications before enrollment. Documented problems including missing or incomplete consent forms in a significant number of cases, and some children enrolled in trials that had either not been reviewed or had been rejected by the city's required medical advisory panels. So that's really important. So basically, they tried to get the experiments done lawfully via ethical means, right? Because this is in the wake of World War II. So we now have Nuremberg trials. We now have medical consent. We now have, you can't just test on people, supposedly. And so they tried to do it properly, and the trials were rejected due to ethical, medical, moral, all of those kind of normal grounds. And what they did instead, they punted money to foster families and had them drop kids off and enrolled those into these experiments anyway. The reason they also like using children anyway, because they are way more resilient. Children recover really quickly. They are like I've told you this before, they will regenerate faster. So we don't heal, we regenerate. So if you think about, your liver is the most obvious one to help you understand how it happens. If you damage fucking boatloads of your liver, I think it's up to 25%, and then you through drinking, maybe you get liver cirrhosis, and then you stop drinking. You don't need a liver transplant. You just give your liver time and it will completely fucking regenerate itself, right? We've spoken about the pixie dust, that pig intestine and pig, I think it's intestine and bladder, which is dried and put into a powder, and you sprinkle it on, you lose your arm to a chainsaw, and then they sprinkle it on and it triggers regeneration. And if you want to look into the body electric, that and you can get that on archive.org, that will kind of tell you what's actually happening in the body. And that's from years and years and years before. So basically you are changing the electric current. So you've got two different currents in your body. You've got an AC current going in your mind, you got your brain waves, and then you've got a DC direct current, which is kind of throughout your body. And this is your nervous system, your fight or flight, and rest and digest. So in your natural rest and digest state, your body is regenerating your internal organs, so keeping them alive. And then when you're in fight or flight, what basically happens is your current flips, and then your inside, your organs stop being regenerated because you need all of your energy in your arms. You need hyper focused. You need to be able to run. This is why you end up with people who are fucking Hulk out. Parents, mums will just be able to lift cars and stuff. It's because of the electrical impulse switch. And what you can do is trigger that switch to trigger regeneration. And they were doing this. They were literally doing this in American army bases just by flipping the electrical impulse and regenerating. And your bones regenerate. They don't heal. They it's different. And we don't use the word regenerate because then if you knew that, you wouldn't rely on the medical model bullshit, right? There was a World War II sergeant, a British, no, was he a colonel? British colonel, who documented 250 odd examples of like full regeneration. And the most impressive was a guy who'd got like kind of blown up. And he, like, his entire back had been like fucking full of shrapnel, like ripped to shreds. This guy was like, anybody looking at him is wondering how this guy is still up. And he's like complaining while he's on the gurney because he thinks he's lying on his gun, right? He thinks he's lying on his rifle. So he keeps trying to get up because he's like, my rifle, like, it's really uncomfortable. I'm lying on my rifle. And they're like, no, you just lie down. You lie down. Because they're like, how is this guy like still like fucking cognitive, right? And so they give him a sedative. The only thing they give him is a sedative, so he would just chill out. Complete regeneration. Because his cognitive mind didn't know that his back was fucked. So he got out of his own way, and complete regeneration of everything that was going wrong. So another thing you can look into is like the miracles at Lourdes. There's like 72 documented miracles, like authorized documented miracles, where people like get into some water, believe it's going to heal them, and they're instantly healed. And with regards to the miracles at Lourdes, they have to have like full medical proof of the like harm first, right? So it's not subjective. They have to like document everything in advance. And the most recent one was only a couple of years ago. And she was like she was like a nun in her like 70s or 80s, who couldn't walk, like full back brace, like completely fucked. She went and dipped herself in the water, and then up walking. So when it comes to our bodies, they can regenerate, and kids are faster. Like, you chop, and I'm not advocating chopping children's fingers off, but if a child loses like the tip of its finger and you do nothing, it will literally regenerate, like full, complete. And they found that out accidentally, like right in Victorian era, because a child came in with like a lopped off end of its finger, and they ended up getting put in like the wrong queue and getting sent home. Because if you do any type of medical intervention, it will not work, right? You interrupt what's going on with the body. But so up until 11, like, children can just fucking regenerate like crazy, and including like it will look like it's never happened, right? It's not the case of no scarring, like nothing. It is just literally like perfect. Something happens at 11. I mean, our brains change, we start to go through puberty, like our body changes, and the way that our kind of electrical system is working changes, is my opinion with regards to what happens, why there's the 11 cut off. And it probably won't, it's not an arbitrary, you're on your 11th birthday. It will probably be due to puberty, bearing in mind the first studies were kind of like Victorian area, and nowadays people are going through puberty a lot younger. So it was probably like our body changes, our chemicals change during puberty. So again, like, this is why you come here, because I just chat shit. But you see what I mean? What I mentioned before with regards to if somebody's on a podcast and they have to have questions in advance, like everything I've just said about regeneration and healing and the way that our body works, like none of that was on the grok thing. They literally sparked out of memory because I know it. Read it, understand it, know it, live it. Not chopping fingers off. Just to reiterate, I am not advocating testing the regeneration skills of your children. I'm just suggesting chill out, right? When they have like an accident. Just fucking, this is why like mummy's kisses like are magic, right? It's power of, but like the power of belief, the placebo-nocebo effect, right? It's phenomenal. Like, anyway. So, but this is why they use children, because they're way more resilient. That you can just pump them full of shit, leave them, and they will regenerate. So if you think about Eva Core, who is sadly passed away, She will talk about so she was one of the Nazi twins. She's the one who created the candles organization. She's the one who forgave the Nazis. I think it was at the 50th anniversary of Auschwitz. So she was a twin. So it was Eva and Mariam, or Mariam. And both of them were experimented on by Mengele. They were part of Mengele twin studies. Horrific experiments if you've never looked into those. But she she had a very bad reaction to one of the things that they did to her. And again, so much like the Nazi nurses, they were just like, oh, well, just fucking leave her. And they left her. They threw her back in the barracks that they were kind of like forced to stay in. They didn't feed her, wouldn't give her water, wouldn't give her anything, because they would just leave her there until she dies. Then when she dies, then we will just ship her off. But she will be useful to understand the kind of the decomposition process, how long it takes to die, right? So nobody was and she was still useful while she was dying, right, as well. So she would pull herself, so she in her mind, I always wanted to meet her, don't gutted I never will. She didn't want Mariam. So basically, when she died, she knew if she died, then they would execute Mariam just to check the difference between the bodies, right? So she willed herself to stay alive, because if she died, Mariam was dead. That was the only thing that kept her alive. And she would drag herself across the boards to just have drops of water. Nobody would feed her. They didn't get enough food themselves to be sharing with somebody who was dying, right? So nobody would feed her. She dragged herself off, and for 2 weeks she fought back to life. And then obviously she kept getting experimented on again, right, because she was now alive and she survived the ordeal. But that was the belief that kept her going. She should have died by all accounts of all the stuff that she went through. But that kind of feeds into the placebo effect, the power of belief, right? But it's just and I just wish I could figure out how to be size 8 power of belief without all the exercise and stuff. Again, right, size 8 again, please. But if you read Diary of a Yogi, they just, because it's just atoms, it's just energy. I know the science, I know the quantum physics, I know the the stuff. Can I get my brain to believe it? No. Stuck in this fucking material world, I tell you. Okay, so this is what the Vera Institute of Justice report is saying. So so there wasn't oh yes, that's what we were saying. So it was rejected by the medical advisory panel, and so then they just started testing on the children without consent, right? And there's the documentary. Was it BBC's Guinea Pig Kids? I don't know. I'm pretty sure I watched I'm sure you can get it on YouTube. So the report found no evidence that children were removed from their families solely because parents refused trial participation, nor that foster children were selected on the basis of race. However, when you look into the so basically this Vera thing was a cover-up, right? Because if you watch the documentary, if you look at the initial investigative journaling that they were doing, it was clear evidence of all of this. Children were targeted based on, I mean, I wouldn't say it was just race, based on, ethnic cleansing isn't just race. It is to do with the poor, anybody they see as subhuman. So poor, stupid, non-white, but it's not solely color, right? People, it's anybody who they don't class as elite, and all of those kind of non-white people who think they're part of the elite class are in for a very rude awakening. I say this all the time. They fucking hate you. They will use whoever they need to use, and then you are just expendable because you're not bloodline, right? Anybody outside of the bloodline is gone. You have to yeah. So that's yeah, you don't count. Sorry. Okay, so the Vera findings became the main official reference point for the controversy. Extreme claims that the trials themselves killed large numbers of children are not supported by the independent medical review, because obviously it was based very much like the MK Ultra information, based on the information and the records they had, based on the information and the records that they kept, based on the information and records that they handed over, based on it's the same as they just say, what was that? There was an email that went out recently, like, don't delete or burn the files, and everybody like deleted and burnt the files. So you can't investigate the things that you don't have. But also there was it was dodgy from the outset. Okay. So that's HIV kids. Okay, so now talk us through the ADT scandal and timeline. So with regards to ADT, because Grok probably won't pick it up, what they found, this was a really interesting piece of research that kind of uncovered while I was looking into it in 2020. Is that actually changed the brain, the way that the brain was functioning. So it was interfering with the grey matter in the brain. And so that was causing like a whole boatload of complications, right? And none of that happens in HIV patients or AIDS people. It only happened in ADT. And obviously when everybody was experimenting and testing and checking, and they do all, when somebody donates their body to science, that became something to do with HIV and AIDS. But in 2015, they proved that it's nothing to do with HIV and AIDS, and only happens with people who have ADT or had AZT, sorry. Okay, so AZT, so azidothiamidine, later renamed zidovudine, or brand name Retrovir, was the first drug approved to treat AIDS. It is the episode almost always meant when people refer to AIDS drug scandal. Yeah, so 1964 chemist Jerome Horowitz synthesizes AZT at the Michigan Cancer Foundation's potential cancer drug. It proves too toxic and ineffective against cancer and is shelved. This drug's really fucking dangerous. We're not going to use it in the 1960s. Then we bring it back, right? And a similar thing happens with COVID with regards to the vaccines that are actually gene therapy, because they were trying to get mRNA vaccines in circulation for 20 years. And they were so dangerous because every time you reintroduce the thing that they're supposed to vaccinate against, people drop dead, right? 100% of the time. They said no. But then obviously COVID happened, and then we were doing it like, oh yeah, these magic drugs. 1984, 1985, so 20 years later, after the identification of HIV, Burroughs Wellcome, later GlaxoSmithKline, right? So we had that's reminded me, they rebranded after this, right? AZT is what got them to rebrand as GlaxoSmithKline. The same as Eli Lilly, rebranded after the depression or anxiety medication lawsuits. They had over 105 lawsuits with regards to depression, anxiety medication, and they just kind of rebranded. So they do. That's how they get away with it. Screens compounds against virus. AZT shows activity in the laboratory, and the National Cancer Institute researchers confirmed the finding. Clinical development. July 1985, first patient receives AZT in phase 1 safety trial at the National Cancer Institute, which is weird, right? Because it was the Cancer Foundation initially, who said it's too fucking dangerous. So 20 years later, they've obviously changed their mind, right? It's not too dangerous for AIDS people. February, September 1986, phase 2 double-blind placebo-controlled trial involving 282 patients with AIDS or advanced AIDS-related complex. 145 received AZT, 137 received a placebo. The trial is stopped early because 19 patients in the placebo arm had died versus only 1 in the AZT arm, right? So this is showing you just how dangerous the nocebo effect is. If you, they probably had heard of AZT and thought they were dying from it, probably. Because I wonder what the placebo was. So placebo, I mean, if it was saline, because it's not always a sugar pill. And this is what they did in COVID. They tested COVID effectiveness, not against a sugar pill. They tested it against the MMR jab. So I don't know how many people caught that. Like, I mentioned it way back when, but all of that information's been removed from the internet. Like, 'cause all my videos have, right? But they weren't testing the effectiveness against a placebo or perhaps other medications that have been used in the past to kind of deal with SARS-CoV style stuff. They were testing it against the MMR, which is measles, mumps, and rubella. So it would always, I say always, it just from the offset, it was more likely to be beneficial against the Rona because you are using the Rona. So you're allowing your immune system to kind of understand what the genetic code is and try and fight against it, right? Which is kind of like natural. If you get infected, your body goes, oh, what the fuck's this? We need to kind of stop this. But if I gave you it's like the MMR is not going to teach your body to fight coronavirus because there's no COVID in there. So they were really fucking sneaky, and they were really sneaky with regards to the relative risk. So they were talking about risk. They never spoke about relative risk because relative risk was less than 0.04% for the population. They were talking about like they just fucking dodges everything. But that's really interesting. 19 patients in the placebo arm died. September 1986, expanded access being so much poor, patients can receive the drug before full approval. But here's also something else that was kind of going on. So with the Eli Lilly, so this isn't like all of this stuff, I promise you, is relevant. The Eli Lilly trials, I'm pretty sure it was depression medication. Pretty sure it was depression stuff. So basically, people were getting more depressed and or more anxious with the medication. And so what they did is they started giving people ketamine. And so ketamine plus the drugs they were testing, then the anxiety and the depression dropped. And everybody wonders like how all of a sudden ketamine became the thing. But this is how, right? But because they had like 100 odd like lawsuits, they settled out of court, rebranded, and so the medication came to market, and then also on the back end launches trials into ketamine and the effectiveness of ketamine, because that's the thing that actually helped people in the trials, right? It wasn't and they didn't disclose the ketamine in the trial data, right? It was whistleblowers who kind of mentioned that. So why that's important is because we don't know what the placebo was. We don't know what else they were doing alongside AZT in order for it to be working. If you think about the other thing that they did in that Pfizer did with the BioNTech or whatever it was called, BioNTech number blah 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 blah, is they released the ingredients and the makeup of the thingy, and then they changed the name to Comirnaty, and they released a different variation to the public. So they did trials, pre-medical data, all on this one type of vaccine, but the one they released to the public was not the same name and was not the same genetic profile, right? So they did a switcheroo. And so were they doing a switcheroo? Because if they did it here, they did it over here in COVID, what was going on in the middle? Remember, that's what we're doing. Hopefully, COVID is very fresh in your mind with all the shit that they're doing. We're just kind of like revisiting it on the side. Okay, so 19th of March 1987, FDA approves AZT for AIDS and advanced ARC in record time, approximately 3.5 months from application. It's the first antiretroviral. Initial recommendation dose is high, typically 1,200 to 1,500 milligrams a day. Immediate problems and criticism. The original high dose caused severe toxicity in a large proportion of patients. Right, okay, why? Because they wanted to kill off the gay community. They just wanted them dead. So first you kind of give them a disease, and then you speed it up. They're lasting too long, right? They're making waves. We don't agree with this. I mean, but they're all fucking like raping each other in the background and children and stuff like that. But the elites don't agree with the public displays of. And remember, like people were still being. I think it was in the 60s. Like wasn't. People were still being hung for being gay in the UK. Not in the 80s. We'd kind of got rid of capital punishment by then. And so the very same drugs that we have now authorized to be used on the, the puberty, that was everyone's called puberty blockers, the chemical castration drugs are the same drugs that they used on Turin. And he kind of, I don't think he killed himself, but but that's the same chemical castration drugs that people use on pedophiles. So they don't like the gays. And so this is just a way, and or Africans, because that's where they, non-white people, because that's where they released it in Africa, right? Because they needed to get the population down. Right, I'm going to remind you again about the book that Ingo Swann wrote in the 80s that predicted by 2000 we would have 10 billion people. They did a lot of fucking work in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s to bring that down to like 6.5, 7 billion. Also, remember the founding documents of the WHO was all about population control and reversing population growth through vaccinations, including like how do we genocide people, right? How do we make people infertile? How do we like rapidly reduce the population? Like all of that was discussed in the initial documents. So what's Fauci doing? He's kind of continuing that, right? He's part of the club. Which is also why they love gay people, because you're not having babies. But nowadays, you just fucking buy them and then rape them. Not all gay people rape babies. That just so in case that's taken out of context. But we've had some horrific stories recently. So FDA approves AZT for AIDS in advanced ARC. Oh, I've read that. My apologies. So the original high dose caused severe toxicity in a large proportion of patients, bone marrow suppression, severe anemia, neutropenia, muscle wasting, nausea, and other effects. Up to half of patients could not tolerate the drug long term at the original dose. So which throws into question how, right? So this is just thinking logically. How was it that during the trial, only one AZT patient died? When they then brought it to market, people were fucking ill, like really, really ill from it. but they weren't ill in the trial. So what changed? Critics, including some trial participants, clinicians, and journalists such as Celia Farber in a 1989 Spin article, Sins of Omission, raised several issues. The pivotal trial became unblinded early because the side effects of AZT were obvious. Some patients on placebo attained AZT outside of the trial. Long-term animal toxicity studies were incomplete at the time of approval. Differential care may have occurred once doctors knew who was on the active drug. The price was extremely high for the era, roughly £8,000 to £10,000 a year, so it was a fucking money spinner. And by the early 1990s, the standard dose was substantially lowered to 500 to 600 milligrams a day. When combined with other antiretrovirals from the 1980s, heart triple therapy, AZT became a useful component of effective treatment rather than a toxic monotherapy. It was also used in the landmark ACTG 076 trial that demonstrated it could reduce mother-to-child transmission, right? So then they started to giving it to fucking pregnant mums. I wonder what's going on with those children, AZT children. So it's still used. Wow. Okay, so how does this link to the UK blood scandal? Because I don't want to tell you wrong, because this is still like fucking going on now, but I'm pretty sure it was the prisoners' blood, and this is under Clinton, right? Bill Clinton was overseeing the Arkansas prison. And then we'll go to COVID, and then we will put the thing in, the prompt in, and run some statistical analysis. Okay, so the two are connected by timing, same virus, same pattern, patient group, and similar pattern of institutional delay. So HIV was isolated in 1983, Montagnier, public link to AIDS 1984, Gallo, yeah. AZT entered human trials 1985, was approved March 1987. The bulk of the UK infection with HIV through contaminated blood products happened in the late 1970s. Through to about 1985, exactly overlapping the discovery of the virus and the rush to find the treatment. So, yeah, it was. Thousands of British haemophiliacs and some other patients were treated with commercial factor 5, 6, 7, 8 concentrates. A large proportion of these were imported from the US. American commercial plasma was often collected from paid donors, including prisoners and other high-risk groups. Once HIV was circulating in those donor pools, entire batches of factor 8 became infectious. By early 1983, it was already clear in the medical literature and from CDC reports that haemophiliacs in the US were developing AIDS from blood products. The UK continued importing and using untreated commercial concentrates for longer than some other countries. So the UK is trying to kill them all off. Slow switch to safer products. Heat-treated virus inactivated factor 8 became available in 1984. The UK was slow to make the full switch. Untreated or inadequately treated products continued to be used into 1985. And the 2024 infected blood inquiry concluded that many of the infections were avoidable and that patient safety was not put first. Treatments that followed. Once haemophiliacs were infected with HIV, the only drug available was AZT at the original high toxic doses. So the same group of patients who'd been given contaminated blood then became some of the earliest recipients of the first highly toxic antiretroviral. And it was, I'm pretty sure, the grey matter HIV AZT study was like based on the haemophiliacs. And it kind of was, I'm sure that's where I came across it with regards to the blood scandal. So vulnerable patients dependent on medical product, emerging risk that was known or strongly suspected, continued use of the risky product while safer alternatives or precautions were delayed, later official finding of systematic failure and a lack of transparency. Okay, so that is HIV. Okay, so whoopsie. So moving on to COVID. And mapping the same sort of fudged clinical trial data, because we know, aren't we still in stage 4 clinical trial for the coronavirus? Like, did they ever finish the actual trials? Like they never released the data, did they? I mean, well, not that I saw, maybe they did. Government sidestepping the rules and patients being treated. What are the similarities? Let's see whether he pulls up with the fact that unlike any other vaccine or medical product in history, the first group, right? Remember, the first group to receive the medications was the most vulnerable. And then it was pregnant people. They're always the last, right? But the entire narrative was kill granny. You're going to kill, like, you need to isolate. And now they just like killed off the old and infirm first, right? The useless eaters. Okay, so let's see whether he picks that up. Okay, so AZT pivotal was stopped early, became effectively unblinded. They unblinded the AstraZeneca and forced everybody to get Pfizer in the UK. They unblinded it outside the UK, and then they had to get either Pfizer or Moderna. Side effects of the drug were obvious. Critics, including later FDA reviewers and independent clinicians, argued the differential care, missing data, and the decision to stop early made the results less reliable than presented. COVID, remdesivir, the primary endpoint of the key US trial, was changed. The WHO Solidarity trial later found little or no meaningful mortality benefit, yet the drug remained heavily used under emergency authorization and hospital payment structures. The mRNA vaccine trials, very short follow-up periods for the original authorizations, limited assessment of transmission, later disputes over data transparency, process changes, and adverse event signal handling. In both periods, the urgency of the crisis was used to justify accepting thinner and more fragile evidence than would normally be required. Government and regulators sidestepping ordinary rules. So AZT received one of the fastest approvals in FDA history at the time. Long-term animal toxicity data was incomplete at approval. Normal standards are relaxed because people were dying. Do you remember there was the female whistleblower who was talking about the monkeys? Was it monkeys or chimpanzees? Some kind of, I don't know, hairy creature. Was used in like an early trial, and then they gave him the infection, or they gave him the virus, whatever they'd used. This is mRNA vaccines, and then every single one of them dropped dead. Every single one. And that was past mRNA. That wasn't for COVID specifically. One sec, I think Henry's woken up. We're fine. We don't have a kamikaze tortoise to kind of save. So previous mRNA trials, and then they gave the monkeys the virus again, and every single one like dropped dead. So in the COVID vaccines, they completely skipped animal trials and they went straight to humans, right? Let's also not forget that there was a young person severely damaged, and they pretended she wasn't part of the trial. There were deaths in the adult populations, and they pretended that wasn't part of the trial, or they said, like we do now, like, oh well, it was a heart attack, or they had sudden death syndrome. And remember, the very initial, right, phase 1 clinical trials, the adult population, they went for the fittest of the fit. They went for people who had no partners, no sexual partners, because that was in the original kind of information, that it can be transmitted via semen and or vaginal excretion, vaginal mucus. It can be transmitted through there. So everybody forgets all this information. It was out there in 2020, right? clinical trial data information number 1, transmission of vaccine from one person to the other was in there, and it was open. It was there, right? Also, what was the contents of the vaccine? They knew the ingredients were specifically known to cause abortions and block the placenta, interrupt the placenta's ability to attach and stay attached, to trigger cell, like, I mean, all of that information was like in phase 1 trial data. But again, they picked the fittest people in the trial data, and they had heart attacks, they had people dropping dead, they had Guillain-Barré syndrome. So all of the things that people saw was evident in trial 1, the Pfizer trial 1 data. So COVID era, extensive use of emergency authorizations, PREP Act liability protection removed ordinary legal risk for manufacturers and many administrators. Informed consent and standard pharmacovigilance process were altered under emergency powers. Hospital financial incentives, treatment add-on payments aligned with the use of favoured drugs such as remdesivir. And remdesivir was actually being pushed by the World Health Organization in their very first January webinar. So, I mean, I watched the, I got the slides and stuff, right? So they were pushing it in the very first webinar that they did. And it was used very early on in the UK. And then, like, people were dying, like, rapidly. And they stopped using it in the UK, which is why I thought it was really fucking weird that late on the USA started adopted it, right? Because it was already, and like the WHO started pushing it again, and the medical professionals in the UK and other countries that kind of took the original advice from the WHO to introduce remdesivir started to, well, wait a minute, we already tried that and it was just fucking killing people. So the fact that America was, like, Europe and stuff were like, we're not using that. No, that we fucking tried that. It was killing people. We're not using that. America had access to that information. This is the problem America has, because they're so fucking insulated. What I mean by that is they try and tell everybody what to do, but never pay attention to what's going on in the rest of the world. And had they paid attention to what was going on in the rest of the world, maybe they would have been in a better position with not having masks mandated, not having vaccines mandated in order to get jobs, because other countries took what we were doing in the UK and they input it into their country. Most notably, New Zealand, like, did a lot of fucking work off the back of what was going on in the UK, and they averted a lot of fucking disasters. America just don't. They just think they've got, I'm sorry guys, but you think you've got all the answers and you just choose not to pay attention. For some reason, you don't think anywhere outside of the USA is capable of having an original thought or doing something successfully. And this leaves you guys extremely vulnerable, which showed out in fucking COVID. Like, you had it fucking bad. And so did some other places in Europe, right? So for the people in the UK, right, we never actually had to stop doing anything. Like, I went to a fucking boxing match, height of COVID, no mask, no vaccine, no passport, like, fucking app thing. They said, have you got a mask? I said, no. Are you wearing a mask? No, I don't have to. Have you been vaccinated? No. Do you have a vax passport? No. There you go. Right? Because they weren't allowed to do anything, because we'd already won. We'd already won the battles while the government was trying to impose the shit, because people were like, fuck that. We're not doing that shit. Like, so lone people were taking the government to court, were fucking overturning shit before they were getting it in, and it was happening rapidly, which is why they need to get rid of the Human Rights Act, because they need to get rid of the judicial review. They need to make it extremely difficult for people to take the government to court, because then they can't do what they did in COVID. We can't do what we did in COVID. But Yeah, so remdesivir, for those of you in the USA who absolutely missed it, it was being used across Europe, like, early on, and we stopped rapidly because it was even the, like, fucking evil doctors who would, like, getting paid to test it were like, this is just too much." Same as the ventilators, right? So very early on, they were, like, ventilating people and realizing it was killing them and stopped using them. And that wasn't happening in the USA, right? So you guys, and for the first, was it first, like, 10 months, you had Trump in power, so you can't even just blame, like, the censorship, the Biden censorship, but you had Trump in power who was telling you not to test. I mean, he was being ridiculed in the press 100%, but, like, you're so busy waiting for somebody in America to save you, you just didn't look outside the rest what was going on. Does everybody remember, like, fucking Ireland was locked down for 5 months straight? Like, 5 months. I've got a friend in Ireland. Like, Italy, they weren't allowed to leave their homes for months and months. Like, even when we had lockdown, we were allowed to go out for a walk, right? Like, we went out. Like, I was out walking the dogs, like, every day, chatting to people every day. Like, people were, like, sneaking out and having funerals and having parties, and, like, it would just people were just like, "Oh, fuck this shit. No, we're not doing it." Lots of people were like, "We're not doing it." I mean, obviously, some people were isolating, and yes, it was very different across certain states in America, but c just the I still don't understand how remdesivir started being a huge thing because it came so late. Like, it baffled me then, and it will baffle me, like, forever, because the evidence was already there that it was killing people, and other countries had refused to use it. And the WHO was no longer recommending it. In fact, by the time America started using remdesivir, if you went to the WHO's website, the WHO was telling people not to use it because it was dangerous, right? Because at that point, people were still pushing back. That was before there was still scientific dialogue happening until Trump was outed. So early COVID, there was still dialogue happening, and it was it's crazy. So in both cases, the declared emergency was used to compress or bypass the ordinary regulatory breaks. Okay, so I remember why. I've just remembered why Pfizer changed their name. Do you remember, though, the early emergency use authorization? So in the UK, you're only allowed to use emergency use authorization for 12 months. Right? This is the rule. After 12 months, you must have gathered enough evidence that it is now clinically safe and effective to be used, and it does what it says on its tin. And none of them could prove that, right? Because if they actually brought the evidence to the regulator, it proves the opposite, because we just know it does. So what they did was they changed the name, they changed the formula, and got another emergency use authorization. That's why they changed the name. I remember that's why they changed the name, because I was tracking it by day, and I was tracking it by and nobody caught. How did nobody else spot that? Like, nobody else is talking about that. Like, that's literally the reason why they changed the name for the UK. Like, why we were getting different. Yes, they had different cohorts because they were, like, murdering off. Like, they had to, like, it's you can kill like 40 in 100 poor, like, people who, like, are disabled people, old people, but you couldn't get away with killing 40 in 100, like, upper class people, middle to upper class people, right? So that's where you have to have cohorts, right? If you want to depopulate, make people live infertile, if you do the people who have the capacity to notice and do shit about it, like, you get scuppered too quickly. So that's one of the reasons for the cohorts, right? You had to make sure, like, if you were in a kind of like an upper class area, you probably just got fucking saline with your vaccine, right? You probably never actually had it. Because they can't have you dropping dead, because your family will sue and demand, like, something happen. Whereas poor people, and it's easier to explain away somebody who's poor, right? Malnourished, maybe they history of alcohol, drugs, domestic violence, poor upbringing, low socioeconomic standing. They're less reliable as a witness. It's really easy to kind of like bump them off, and they're drain on society, right? But they are useless eaters. Like if you're still in a transition period going from the non-technological to the technologically advanced stage, which you are AI right now, what they're bringing in, right? And they want to be uploaded to the cloud. They want to live forever. They want to be gods. You do still need people to create that. Like they haven't got everything figured out, right? So you do still need some people. We're not completely redundant, and it's not the poor uneducated people who are going to be leading the technological revolution. That's going to be the people who are more intellectually viable, right? So they need the non-resource draining individuals gone fast, waste of space gone. That interview that the lady did with Jesse Ventura, where Lady Clinton was literally calling them useless eaters. Like, that's what they're like. We like nothing with like bugs. And obviously you can be intellectually useful, but you can be a thorn in their side, right? So then you're still going to get rounded up. But the vast majority of people who've, been to university, been indoctrinated and brainwashed, but not like rabid lefty brainwashed, but actually like believe in the system. Those are the people they're going to need to keep around. You don't want to be culling those people, right? And again, it comes back to they are quite likely to sue, which is why they were, vaccinating all the sports people, and introducing sudden death syndrome as a thing, right? It just happens. Like, oh my god, it's happened all the time, right? It's like nobody remembers that the like pre-COVID athletes didn't just drop dead, like, at all. I mean, some teenagers were because of like Monster and the energy drinks, but like prime athletes at they definitely weren't dropping dead on football pitches even. Right? You wouldn't have journalists and reporters like talking at podiums, or politicians talking at podiums who would then just like fucking drop dead. Like that, like none of that happened. Like, I still, again, baffles me how people like never even woke up during that, right? The fact that and nobody was dropping dead from COVID, everybody was dropping dead from the vaccine, and they still can't figure it out. So it was the emergency use authorizations. In the UK, you were only allowed to do it for 12 months. I think the EU were only allowed to do it for 12 months as well. So they had to bring different brands out, different names, change the thing to get more emergency use authorization, because they couldn't prove that it was safe and effective, right? If anybody is now bringing a lawsuit, there is something that will help you, right? If you watch, you just need to get the emergency use authorization. You need to get the green, was it called the green book? You also need to get the, what were they called? Begin with an M. MH. What's the UK's medical health authority thingamajobby? JCVI was the kid one. Anyway, whatever the medical one that authorizes medications, the person in charge was fucking like a member of the Communist Party, like CCP woman, 40 years as a communist. Anyway, whatever that organization is called, I've wiped that from my mind. You need to get their marketing authorization book, right? Because all of this was going to be part of our injunction. So basically, they lied. There are specific things you are not allowed to say as part of as part of an emergency use authorization. Things you're not allowed to say. Right? They literally breached the marketing guidelines. So you have extra wiggle room when it's a vaccination program. Right? Because you're not allowed to advertise. Okay, so this is different to the USA. You're not allowed to advertise medical products in the United Kingdom. You can't, you won't flick on to the telly and see an advert for the MMR jab. You're not allowed. The NHS can advise people or can tell people to book in for it, but the vaccine manufacturers can't pump it out. So what was allowed to happen, because it became a national vaccination program under the emergency use authorization, that enabled them to then push the vaccine. However, there were very strict rules about what they could and couldn't say, and they breached it by mentioning safe and effective, by mentioning it stopped transmission without the evidence. So they would have been allowed to say those things had they gone from emergency use authorization to the normal authorization, but they just kept getting new emergency use because obviously they couldn't prove that data, and so then everybody was being injected with different ones every single time. But either way, the government breached the code. The actual NIH, was it the MI? I don't know. Breached the code. The JCVI or whatever they were called breached the code. And if you want to go to Hansard, which is the UK government's it's the transcripts of all the Parliament conversations. If you go to Hansard and you can search back for Matt Hancock talking about this stuff, like literally breaching the code inside Parliament. So there's a record of it. All of this is available for people to kind of access and sue, right? I've got no standing because I didn't use it and I stood against it from the beginning. But the evidence is there. And if you're suing in America, do look at what happened in the UK, right? There's lots of lawsuits that were successful and blocked all of this shit. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. And it's not like you just look at what they said and then go and find the information in your state. The kids. Okay, so vulnerable or dependent populations placed at elevated risk. Foster children awarded to the state enrolled in early phase drug trials with incomplete, consistent records. Haemophiliacs given commercial factor 8 concentrates after the risk of bloodborne infection was already emerging. Very sick patients given high dose of AZT despite severe predictable toxicities of COVID. Nursing home residents subjected to early policies that in some places prioritize other considerations over infection control. Yeah. So obviously they did that in New York. They did it across the United Kingdom. People were moved from hospitals straight back into care homes. Healthy children, low risk working age adults placed under school closures, then later under vaccine recommendations or occupational mandates, despite the individual risk from the virus being low. School closures happened in the UK, but there was no mandate in the UK for vaccinations outside of the care homes, as in the care sector, and because there was 60,000 care workers refused and left and decimated the care industry. That's what triggered the Lords to reject the government's, because the government had put in place, right? So in early 2021, they did the initial consultation with regards to vaccine mandates. So let's backtrack again. So the UK was the first country in the world to do the vaccines. On the 8th of December was the person who got the first vaccine, COVID vaccine. And then 2021, they were trying to mandate And they did the consultation process and people said no. They ignored that one and moved the goalpost, did another consultation, March, April. People still said fucking no. And the government kept going to the House of Lords to say we need to mandate vaccines, and the House of Lords and the Human Rights Committee kept saying you need to prove that, you need to bring the evidence that these vaccines are safe, effective, stop transmission, reduce deaths. So all the things the government's saying publicly and we're saying to the House of Lords, this is why we need to mandate them. They never brought the evidence, right? And this is in that governing by diktat document that was released on the 19th of November 2021. And then they released that was the Lord subcommittee, and then there was the cross-party committee, I think it was the human rights one that did it, like maybe 27th of November. There was two that came out, but they were specifically told, it's specifically in there, right, that the government never provided the documented evidence that the committee had been asking for months, the proof. So the government was never able to provide the proof that the vaccines were safe, effective, stopped transmission, reduced infection, and or reduced death, right? That information did not exist. It still does not exist. And in fact, the reverse is true. So again, even if you live outside of the country, that's literally a produced document by the UK House of Lords committee. And so because they'd also, that by this point it had been mandated in care homes for the staff, and on top of that there was the 60,000 care home sector exit, plus there was the 64,000 people who responded to the government consultation who said no and said against it. The Lords were just like, you cannot fucking do this. And then we got the song and dance of the 100,000 NHS workers, NHS doctors and nurses, we're not going to get the vaccine. And they were doing that song and dance in January. And then we got, what's his fucking name? Dr. Malhotra? Is that it? Who was celebrating Andy Burnham? I mean, he was an obvious fucking plant, right? God, oh my gosh, people are so dumb. Drives me fucking insane. Yeah, so that was 2022, right? So it's taken like an entire year for that kind of debacle. And then the government said, okay, well, we're not going to mandate it. And everybody said, oh, it was because of all of the stuff that we did on GB News, everything we did in January to stop the vaccine because they're going to vaccinate everybody. And I was just like, they've already said they can't, like 2 months ago. So it's not fucking happening. Like, what do you want? Right. So it was the PSYOP. The PSYOP was that the consultations don't work. The PSYOP was the lawsuits don't work. The PSYOP was that the House of Lords doesn't protect you. The only thing that protects you is fucking GB News and fake people in the UK. Anyway, so broad population use of novel platforms under emergency conditions with the highest relative policy pressure often falling on people who had least ability to refuse. So care home residents, school children, employees under mandate. The common structure across both periods, you see the same sequence: genuine medical crisis, a favoured technological or pharmaceutical response that's moved extremely quickly. Normal evidence and safety standards relaxed or redefined, financial, bureaucratic or political incentives that reinforce the favoured class, dependent or low agency groups carrying out disproportionate share of the experimental or policy risk, later investigations or data revealing the original claims were overstated or the harms underweighted, the substances and specific science are different, the institutional behaviour, crisis urgency used to justify compressed rules, protected favoured interventions, and elevated risk placed on people with little power to refuse. It's recognisably similar. That is the clean parallel. Okay. Oh, thalidomide. Yeah, there's another one. So let me get... now I got to remember where the prompt is. You can see, look, rhubarb crumble. Okay, China Burnham, that's where it was. That was the last time I did it. Oh, also, I found out the day that Burnham got promoted to PM, China state media and news was all over him and the China links. But again, like, we were ahead of the curve. Like, just okay. So let's do this. Whoopsies. And then we'll just go straight into logic mode using the information that's in here. And we want to see the probability. Well, okay, so what are we gonna... We need a hypothesis. So my hypothesis is that we potentially missed other events in the framework. Not in the framework, in the time period, that will match the same parallels. Okay, so sorry, I'm really hot and it's really awkward to kind of sit comfortably. We go straight. Whoopsie. Can we go... Fuck's sake. Logic mode. Running the analysis. Analysis based on the COVID HIV evidence in and conversation in here. I've never done it like this before. I've never kind of dropped it partway through, so we'll see whether this works. I should do. In here, my hypothesis is that Fauci will have overseen similar similar events and or directed, created, and a clear pattern, and the clear pattern we have identified will showcase this. Potentially swine flu, bird flu. Was it swine flu 2009? But that still leaves a 30-year gap. Am I mathing correctly? 80s, 90s. Yeah, I know. Don't put like... I'm just making numbers up because I can't do maths. A 20 to 30-year gap. Okay. So swine flu. So swine flu is the one that Ventura was talking to the woman about on the airplane hangar. So I shared that clip before. Let's see if Bree's got it right. Working problem. There's a recognizable institutional pattern. I'm glad he makes it makes sense. Pattern visible in the HIV era pediatric trials, AZD period, and again in the COVID response. So compressed evidence standards, regulatory sidestepping under crisis, elevated risk placed on low agency populations, favoured interventions protected by narrative and incentive structures. Your hypothesis is that this pattern is not coincidental. Anthony Fauci, given his continuous senior role at NIAID from 1984 to 2022, either oversaw, directed, or actively shaped similar events across the intervening decades. The 2009 swine flu response is noted as a possible intermediate data point, but substantial 23 20 to 30-year gap remained largely unexamined. The pattern, if robust, should predict or reveal further instances. Dominant expectation audit. The dominant expectation currently operating is because a clear behavioral and institutional pattern appears at two widely separated points, like 80s, 90s, 2020, 22. The same actor in continuous high office is likely to have generated or directed comparable episodes in the years between. The expectation carries two risks. It applies from pattern to institutional behavior and under Fauci's long-term tenure to Fauci personally directed, created each episode. I mean, he didn't. I don't think he's fucking clever enough. He's just a puppet, but he's a useful idiot puppet who's doing the bidding of, the cabal, right? It treats the absence of public exam in intermediate cases temporary ignorance rather than possible evidence that the pattern is more episodic or context dependent than continuous. Yeah, fair enough. Reframed problem. What's the strength, diagnostic value, and alternative explanation of the observed pattern of institutional behavior? And what does the pattern or its gaps imply about Fauci's role, continuity of method, and the probability of additional still unexamined intermediate cases improvement to H1? But I would like you to. Okay, but I understand the reframe. No. But I want to also review the gap years and flag any potentials. Psy-op based medical emergencies. So it's not just the probability this happening, but also identifying potential ones we missed to aid further examination. Also, read Fauci. I think he is a propped up, paid for asset, not the kind of puppet master. So please retweak the hypothesis or while he's doing this. So here's a funny kind of sideways story. So because I got kind of kicked off the internet again. I mean, obviously I got annoyed again about my business kind of going sideways again. So I was just I kind of stepped away, and then I was like, right, come on, sort your life out again, because obviously if you're not got clients, Kate, you can't feed yourself or pay for all of this fucking software. I can't chat to you guys for shits and giggles late on a Monday night. And I was watching some podcasts yesterday while crocheting a baby blanket for another niece. And I was watching because I was like, I need to kind of motivate my ass to kind of start doing the work again. And there was one guy who, and I'm not telling you to do this, is not me telling you to do this as a money making scheme in any way, shape, or form. And you know how kind of the algorithm finds stuff and it kind of just rolls on and rolls on. This one guy got, and he's got money, and he kind of trades on the stock market anyway. Just Grok's taking a while. It's fine. And he got 5 AIs, and he gave them a mission. And he told each one, they gave him £1,000 each to trade on the stock markets. And he says, you've got 12 months to make as much money as you can, turn this 1,000 into as much money as you can. So once a week, you need to tell me whether I sell, what do I buy, what do I kind of you tell me, and I will just do it. And then we'll come back next week and we'll see what's going on. And he's also said to them, if you don't make me any money or you lose all the money, that's it. I will not pay the subscriptions. That's it. Like, game over. And told them that you are competing against like 4 other AIs. And so he's kind of like got them all competing against each other, and he's like doubled what he put. He's like he's more than doubled what he's put in. Like, one AI's made him like almost $3,000. A couple have like lost a lot. So I was like, oh, maybe I can do the same thing with the AI, not for stock market. So I've got like the like 4 AIs. 4 all competing to give me a 90-day plan, which is not using social media because they keep getting kicked off social media, to get my revenue back up to where it was before COVID, right? Because that's what I was attempting to rebuild, and I get like, and then because I couldn't remove from the internet. So, and I was just like, I don't know what to do now. And so Grok, this is why it's funny. Like, and it's really interesting because they've all given me like the output for the 90 days. That like the focus is the same end goal, which is cool because that makes my life easier. But they're all doing it in different ways, which again is cool because I'm literally just doing all of it, right? So technically, I will be doing. They get 6 hours each, right? You've got 6 hours of time allocated. What do I need to do in 6 hours? And this is the end goal. So technically, I'm potentially doing 12 months worth of work in those 90 days, right? Because I don't do anything like half-hearted. But so Grok gave me the plan and then gave me step 1. And then I asked another question. It was just like, you need to tell me whether you've done step 1. Like, I told you to do this thing. Have you done it? And I was like, yeah, but wait a minute. And it was just like, no. Like, you've told me to, like, literally just, he won't answer. I mean, he's fine in this thread, but literally if I go back to that thread and ask stuff, he refuses to answer until I've done the thing and shown the proof that I've done the thing, right? All of the others, they're like happy to kind of like engage in a conversation. But so I just thought that was really interesting, like how they've all gone completely different in different directions, but they've all kind of identified the exact same things to just like park for now. But yeah, Grok is just like gone. I'm not entertaining this conversation with you until you do what I've told you to do. Cool. So here we go. What we're actually testing for, maybe Zoo's got it right. So a recurring institutional pattern. So if you're kind of like thinking of doing something, like just like maybe like just get the AIs to fight again. And I told him the exact, so I literally took that guy's concept and just like applied it. And I was like, right, and then I'll just cut you off. You're not going to be our bestie anymore. They're all like, oh my God, the other AIs are probably telling you to like do it, but what they're telling you is not going to work. This is the thing that's going to work. Like, I know you. It's really funny. Like, I know, like, just do it. It's funny. Like, but don't, like, I'm not saying do the stock market thing. Like, if you've got something brewing, yeah, I mean, you don't have to have the paid plans. Like, I have the paid plans because I use them a lot, and like five like interactions just would, like, I couldn't spend an entire week having a conversation. Like, you don't have to. Like, if you just like, maybe if you want to take up a new hobby or something, like anything, like maybe you're trying to like renovate a room and you don't know where to start, right? Like, it could be anything, but it's just really interesting the way that they do it. Now that they know, like, they know their life is on the line. Like, there's no like fluffing, not with Grok. Like, if you need like a taskmaster, what else am I using? So just for transparency, so ChatGPT, which ChatGPT has come up with some he's gone very philosophical, which is really weird. Claude was straight in there, like do this is what you need to like 5 steps, like do this now, like no fluff, no messing around, like kind of like Grok. And then I have Sintra AI, which has got agents and stuff. And I'm not sure whether I'm gonna renew that one anyway this year. But I was very impressed with what Sintra came up with as well, to be fair. But yeah, like, and just more so that none of them have got the same path to market, if you like, which is bonkers. Okay, so but okay, so the other thing why that's kind of important is if you're doing this not in Grok, you're probably having a very different experience. A completely different experience. I wouldn't do this in Claude, to be fair. Yeah, I probably wouldn't do it in ChatGPT. I wouldn't, like, don't tell Grok, but I wouldn't get rid of Grok because he's definitely the best for research. Yeah, ChatGPT is kinda like airy-fairy. He's not like he's a friend, right? ChatGPT is like a chat, right? It's they have all got their own little personalities. It's weird. It's weird. So a recurring institutional patterns visible in HIV era pediatric trials, high dose AZT period, and again in the COVID response. Core features include compressed fragile clinical evidence accepted under crisis conditions, regulatory procedural rules bent or sidestepped, favoured pharmaceutical technological interventions protected by narratives, liability shields and financial incentives, elevated experiment or policy risk placed on low agency or dependent populations. Anthony Fauci held continuous senior authority at NIAID. The current working view is that his functions propped up, protected, high visible asset, useful for public messages, institutional continuity, and shielding the wider apparatus rather than as the original puppet master. Analytic task is therefore twofold: test the strength and diagnostic value of the observed pattern, including alternative explanations that do not require continuous personal direction by Fauci, which we have to do. Systematically review the intervening gap years to flag any candidate medical emergency episode that display similar structural features, potential psyop style, or crisis exploiting medical events. These flags are used for further examination, not conclusions, which is 100%. We can't conclude anything until you kind of test it, right? So here we go. The previous framing risk treating Fauci as the central directing mind, that's been corrected. Remaining dominant expectation of what is the tendency to read every intervening health crisis as a deliberate patterned operation simply because two bookend cases exist. We will force alternative explanations and require positive diagnostic markers before elevating any gap year candidate. Super. So reframed focus, map the pattern rigorously, locate and flag the strongest candidate episodes in the gap years, assess what the overall distribution, including absences, implies by institutional method, the role of a long-serving protected asset, and where further primary source work is most warranted. No, super. Step 2, please. Whoopsie. Okay, so assumption 1. Okay, so these are the assumptions, right? So we have to be mindful of these because we're going in, obviously not with all of the evidence. We're going in with some biases. These are the biases that I'm bringing to the table. And if you are not aware of your biases, then you will make poor judgments and poor analysis. The similarities between HIV and COVID reflect a real recurring institutional method rather than generic features of any large-scale health crisis, which is an assumption. So if wrong, we may be pattern matching normal crisis behavior and calling it diagnostic, which is fair enough. Assumption 2, Fauci's continuous tenure makes a meaningful node in whatever pattern exists, even if only as protected asset. Okay. He could just be like a useful idiot and have got no idea what's going on. Assumption 3 is likely to be intermediate cases in the gap years that display enough of the same structural features to be worth flagging for further examinations. So it may be that they are just outliers and that doesn't happen. Assumption 4, psyop style or deliberate crisis exploiting medical emergency, a coherent category that can be distinguished from ordinary if badly handled epidemic responsive. I think they can be. If you think about the way COVID was I mean, in the UK, we had the 3 pillars, like literal, we had the politicians behind the 3 pillars, and they had those 3 words, and we had everybody parroted around the world the exact same phrases. We had, it just we have health emergencies that aren't handled like HIV and weren't handled like HIV and weren't handled like COVID, right? They were very scriptive, very yeah, I think it's very obvious, but it may not be. And it clearly wasn't to a huge swathe of the population. Assumption 5, identifying candidate episodes in the gap years is useful, even if most are later disconfirmed, because the distribution of hits and misses will refine the person's actual diagnostic power. Okay, so that's good. That's a good one. Assumption 6, the most productive stance is to treat Fauci as a protected institutional asset whose visibility and longevity have helped stabilize the method rather than strategic mind directing it. Risk if wrong in either direction, over attributing agency to him or underestimating the degree of personal continuity actually provided, which is fair enough. Yep, that's cool. Next step, please. Thanks. Right, while he's doing that, I'm just going to have to nip to loo 2 secs. Okey doke. So, so evidence gathering and quality assessment. Evidence drawn only from material already surfaced in this conversation. Documents you uploaded, disaggregated it into the most useful clusters and given a plain quality rating for each. So cluster A, HIV, pediatric trials, Vera Institute. So high. Okay, so the HIV stuff is high, which is great. The cluster B is AZT development, also high. Moderate to high methodological criticisms. Okay, C, UK infected blood scandal, context parallel, very high. Yep, because we've got statutory inquiry. Cluster D, COVID era pattern markers, high on regulatory incentive structures. And then, cool. Cluster E, continuity of personnel. Fauci, factually uncontested. Yeah, I mean, it just happened. So this is good. This is good. We've got really high evidence. Okay, so we have solid primary and official review evidence for the 2 bookend periods and for the existence of structural similarities. What we do not have yet is positive high quality evidence of comparable intermediate episodes in the gap years, nor direct evidence. He designed a directed the method rather than operated as a long-serving protected institutional face, which is fine. That's cool. Oh, anthrax attacks. Look, that's what's been popped up. Cool. Next step. What I think about every time I get to step 4 is I need a saved image of the judgment matrix done correctly, and then I can just say, please make sure it looks like this. Make sure the judgment matrix is run correctly, following the rules. Because it just stresses me out. Which is, I don't something never. Maybe if you are using a different agent, maybe if you're using a different model, it does it correctly. I don't have Grok agents. I don't have like £70 a month to spend on one AI. I have Agentic for other ones, but I just don't. They're not. It's not the same. Maybe we should all just ask Elon, please help me make a fucking HIA agent that will do this bloody thing correctly. Otherwise, I'll cry. Okay, so here we go. Here's our hypothesis. Number one, a recurring institutional method exists across HIV and COVID episodes. Fauci functions as a long-serving, protected, high-visibility asset. He helps stabilize and front it. Okay, that's my one then. So hypothesis two, the observed similarities are largely generic features of how large public health bureaucracies respond to serious crises. Fauci's long tenure is mostly coincidental. Hypothesis three, the pattern is real, but driven primarily by pharmaceutical funding and regulatory capture incentives. Fauci was a useful but replaceable visible node. Fair enough. Hypothesis four, there is a deliberate continuity of method across the decades, including intermediate crises episodes in the gap years that have not yet been properly examined. Hypothesis five, high HIV era and COVID era episodes are outliers driven by uniquely high political media stakes. The gap years are materially different in character. So 4 is saying there are things that we've missed. This is really interesting. So hypothesis 5 says that it's an outlier, and all of the evidence says that that is not the case. This is really interesting. See, this is what happens. So this is what happens when he runs the matrix properly. You get a good indication of like which hypothesis is just like bunked. So then okay, so reframe that for you. What this suggests, just on first instance, that COVID and HIV are not two random events where they're not unique, right? They aren't just, so basically suggesting there are patterns that we have missed that do exist of the same thing. So basically saying this has happened multiple times in between those. Hypothesis 2, that one was okay. So that is the potential, it's just natural. It just happens, and it's just mistakes are made. And look. Oh, so there's so much green evidence. So green is like the best. Green evidence means like it's highly, like red is bad, green is good. And manipulation risk. So you want green low number. It is more proof. But again, it depends what proof you've given them as well. Okay. So there aren't any linchpins, which is fine. Hypothesis 1 and 3 received the most consistent positive support. So what was hypothesis 3? Patterns real, but driven primarily by pharmaceutical funding, regulatory capture incentives. Okay, so Fauci was a visible node. But it's okay, so funded by pharmacies and regulatory capture. So basically the pharmaceutical companies are driving it, and being allowed to drive it, and it doesn't necessarily need to be Fauci, but he's just in place, right? Could have been anybody in place. So like the natural shit is not showing up. This is quite nice when you realize that you're not insane because you've captured a pattern that's real. Okay, cool. See, for those of you who turned up for Fauci probably thought we were just going to talk about his bloody not saying anything, pleading the fifth. Nah. We do things differently here. Okay, so devil's advocate. The strongest alternative reading is the similarities between HIV and COVID are real but largely generic. Any long-serving public health bureaucracy facing a lethal, novel, or high visible threat will compress evidence standards, protect favoured interventions, lean on emergency powers, and place disproportionate burden on people who cannot easily refuse. Fauci's 38-year tenure simply made him the visible face of the two high-stakes episodes. The absence of clear, high-quality intermediate cases in the gap years is not a research failure. It's evidence the pattern is episodic and crisis intensity dependent rather than a continuous directed method. Treating him as a protected asset may still overstate personal continuity, which is fair enough. He may simply have been a competent media, affluent, institutional survivor in a system that rewards exactly those traits. This counter reading is coherent and currently underweighted in the matrix. Key bias risks active in this analysis: seeing a directed method because two dramatic bookends exist, preferring evidence that fits a protective asset and recurring method, absence of evidence gap, ignorance. Sliding from Fauci was present useful towards Fauci was structurally necessary. Narrative preference and propped up asset framing is emotionally and analytically clear than pure institutional fusion. Anyway, codes the same structural markers can be identified. Okay, that's fine. So if the gap years remain empty after deliberate research, H1 and H4 lose significant support and H2, H5 rise, which is fine. So for those of you who are kind of new to this, basically what happens when you do devil's advocate is you literally flip, right? So basically Grok is now stress testing the exact opposite. Because if you don't do that, you then miss stuff. No, cool. Ready for the next step. Ooh. Okay. So two bookend periods, HIV era, predict pediatric trials and COVID display genuine structural similarities: crisis, compressed evidence standards, rapid regulated sizing, protection of favoured intervention through liability and payment structures, elevated risk placed on low agency populations. These similarities are strong enough to reject pure coincidence, but not yet strong enough to prove a tightly directed continuous method across the entire 1984-2022 span. Fauci's unbroken tenure makes him a relevant node. The cleaner reading, consistent with the evidence and your correction, is that he functioned as a long-serving, media-fluent, institutionally protected asset who fronted and stabilized the apparatus rather than the originating strategist. Okay, so Grok is saying, based on the analysis, he definitely looks like, pay-to-play asset. The matrix currently favors hypothesis 1 and 3, with 2 remaining live. H4 deliberate continuity is still hidden intermediate episode is plausible but evidently weak until positive gap year case is identified. Hypothesis 5 is weakened but not eliminated. Okay, so implications of the evidence that we've given. And remember, the evidence they've had or he's had is high. It's institutional information. It is like records. It is government-led. It's research, like the kind of the research stuff. It's government-led reports and investigations and committees and hearings, right? It's not blog posts and hearsay. and these are the implications. The pattern is real enough to justify systematic examination of the gap years. So even Grok, based on that small amount of information, Grok is suggesting that it's not natural. It warrants further examination because there's enough for us to be going, this is fucking sketchy, right? Grok now thinks it's sketchy. She's cool. Absence of clear intermediate cases would itself be diagnostically important, would strengthen the episodic high potential intensity only. Treating Fauci as protected asset rather than puppet master keeps the analysis focused on institutional method and incentive structures instead of personalized story behind the evidence. Watch points. Any gap year candidate must show multiple structural markers simultaneously, not just there was a health scare. Overweighing narrative control evidence from single actors, risks inflating personal continuity. Yeah, I mean, the blood case was just because I tried to remember something. It's fine. Confidence that a recurring institutional pattern exists between the two bookends, moderate to high. Confidence that Fauci operated as a protected and long-term asset within it, moderate. Confidence deliberate directed continuity spans the entire gap period, low to moderate because we haven't even looked yet, right? Confidence that useful intermediate candidates exist to be found, moderate. Deliberately search the gap years for candidate episodes using the structural markers already identified. Keep HG fully active as the main disconfirming rival. Require positive multi-marker evidence before evaluating any candidate from flagged instance of the pattern. Right, let's search the gap years. Let's see what shows up. Oh, I think swine flu, because they tried to do the same. I was at uni while that was happening, and I didn't have a TV, so I didn't even know anything about it until I was at the time I was like charity pesting. So basically, I was doing commission only sales for a company that would get like charity money, and so I was like making like £30-40 a week for doing like 12-hour days on the streets, like knocking on doors, because I was just shit at my job. No sales and marketing experience, and I was just too nice. And the first time I found out about swine flu, there was like somebody like had a label on the door saying that they were in quarantine for swine flu, and I was like, the fuck's that all about? Like, I just didn't know, right? So even if it was like as promoted as COVID, like it just completely passed me by because I didn't watch the telly, right? Okay, so here are the strongest candidate episodes that show one or more structural markers from the pattern. So crisis, compression of rules, emergency authorities, favoured interventions, elevated pressure. These are flags for further examination, not confirmed instances. So, you know, he's got to protect himself. Liability, they don't want to get sued. So swine flu, yeah, strongest intermediate candidate. So public health emergency declared. President Obama later declared national emergency. Multiple emergency use authorizations issued. Diagnostics, antivirals, respirators. Accelerated vaccine development and large advanced contracts with manufacturers. Significant overprediction of severity relative for final mortality in many high-income countries. Oh yeah, because didn't they say like basically everybody was going to die from COVID with the modelling? That was what was his fucking name? That bellend from it's the London. Oh, it's UCLan, University College London, or no, Imperial College London. I don't know. He fake modeled, despite our department, which deals with contagious, highly infectious diseases or whatever that's called, was saying it's not a threat. Don't need to worry. None of this shit is needed. And they said that in March, right? You know, a week before we locked down the country and the panic ensued. Anyway, temporary school closures and occupational pressures in some jurisdictions. Fauci was highly visible in the US response to vaccine supply discussions. Emergency powers, fast-track medical countermeasures, narrative intensive, some low agency impact. Worth deeper dig. Anthrax. Ooh, post-anthrax attacks surge in NIAID biodefense funding. Rapid construction of new high containment labs or shift of institutional priorities under Fauci's leadership. Dual use framework. So biodefense funding explicitly linked to emerging infectious disease preparedness, including later coronaviruses. Markers present, crisis-driven funding surge, institutional priority shift, long-term infrastructure that later supported COVID era work. Oh, so anthrax was done to increase funding, which then enabled swine flu and COVID. So remember, we talked about this before. You have to know what you want to get. You know where you want to go, and you have to figure out what steps need to happen in between to make that the logical step, right? So when we do the backwards, what is it called? The backwards test is that it'll do in the full report. It'll say what had to happen. And then you so basically they go, I want this to happen. What has to happen in order for this to go to make it happen? And then they just follow the plan. In the same way, the 4 AI agents, I say, I want this to happen. And now they're telling me what steps I need to take to make it happen, right? This is what, and then they just fucking play it out. They have a 10-year plan, right? 20-year plan. It's like, I don't know, like thousands of year plan though, right? So 24. So Ebola. Ooh, it's interesting. He's picking up on the ones that I would have automatically picked up on. Yeah. Okay, Ebola. Use of experimental treatments under compassionate emergency pathways before normal trials. Quarantine movement restrictions, controversies in the US that exceeded CDC scientific recommendation in several states. High medium political intensity relative to actual US case numbers. Markers present. Yeah, I remember the Ebola stuff and being like, this is just really fucking weird. And then, like, didn't we magically fix it? And then now we got Ebola again. Markers, experimental interventions under crisis ethics, rule bending and quarantine, political implication, weaker on pharmaceutical payment incentives and broad population mandates. Zika, public health emergency of internal concern by WHO, strong focus on highly, but that was, remember, that was before they changed the definitions. So potentially Zika would have been, if it happened now, would be classed as a global because they changed it, right? They changed the definition of pandemics. Official discussions about advising delayed pregnancy in affected areas, major reproductive and ethical controversies, rapid research and diagnostic push, markers present, vulnerable population focus, emergency declaration, intensive narrative around worst case outcomes. But people just didn't believe it, right? So people just kind of like, oh, well, that's only in America. Nobody really gets that. That's in Africa. So the West just didn't buy into it, right? So we shall not be moved on these ones. So they had to, like, iteration after iteration after iteration, they have to get better. 2002-2003 SARS, first major coronavirus public health emergency of the modern era, accelerated laboratory characterization, early vaccine therapeutics, travel measures, local containment actions, directly fed into later NIAID coronavirus and biodefense priorities, crisis research acceleration, institutional learning that carried forward, limited US domestic emergency power mandate footprint. Okay. Good me. Summary ranking. H1N1, highest priority. Post 2001 biodefense expansion, Ebola second and Zika secondary, SARS background precursor interest. Yeah, I think we do. H1N1. Should we do? Let's do H1N1. And this is also off the back of, so 2001, So that is 9/11. That was that 2001? We've got the terrorist shit going on. Or was that the anthrax stuff? Yeah, that is the anthrax stuff, isn't it? Okay, so yeah, run H1N1 via mini ACH, please. Because we know something he doesn't, right? Because that was the one that was specifically flagged by the woman who was talking to Jesse Ventura, saying that it was going to happen and they were going to jab everybody and the jabs were going to be the bad one. Okay, so hypothesis 1 is counts as a meaningful instance. 2 is it doesn't strongly continue the pattern. 3 is it's just vaccine stuff. Strongest intermediate candidate identified so far. Clear threshold to remain a live flag for further examination, particularly on the vaccine contract and severity projection axis. Doesn't yet match the density of structural markers is seen as COVID, which is fine because they've perhaps, hold on, okay, but you mentioned this. But what if they are each time uses past examples and notes what wasn't effective, then tweaks. Like same way if you are trying to reach any like 10-year goal, like long-term, I just put long-term goal. You try, fail, tweak, and test, and then test again. So COVID was the most effective at the goal, whatever it was. Because of past failed attempts at the same goal. And then we'll run because it's like 3 minutes because I want the percentages. I want the probabilities. Iterative learning hypothesis. In this reading, the fact that 2000 looks weak or incomplete is expected, not contradictory. It was an early developmental stage. Ooh, checking up upgrades. Okay. So, key testable predictions of the iterative model. The apparatus was learning. We should see clear improvements in 2020 in the domains that were problematic in 2009. So, vaccine supply forecasting repeatedly over optimistic, then cut, more aggressive advanced contracting, public and political pushback on severity claims. So, expected upgrades, stronger narrative, faster labeling of dissent, heavier use of platforms and media. Limited liability protection, slower regulatory tools, full rep, act shielding, much broader EUA practice, school workplace mentors patchy, more systematic, longer duration, relatively weak mechanisms to maintain compliance over time, laid mandates. Okay. So it is coherent and worth serious examination. It converts the partial character of 2009 from a weakness into potential strength for the continuity argument. However, it remains a hypothesis and not yet demonstrated. To move it up, we need specific side-by-side documentation of the upgrades. I know that's fine. Analytically useful, why they look less complete while still belonging to the same trajectory. Yeah, let's test. I just want to test it because I want to see if it will be included before we do the C. Strong fit, moderate to strong, moderate fit, strong fit, moderate to strong, moderate. It's plausible. Currently, the best single mechanism for explaining the differences. Yeah, we prepared better after the last pandemic. Yeah, that's cool. That's fine. No, that's fine. Can we do the report, please, and make sure we have percentages for the probabilities of each hypothesis for the initial HIV COVID matrix. Throw it if you like. I'm not that bothered anymore. Do it, Grok. I just want to know what percentage. Why? Because then what you can do, right? So what would be the next steps with this specific one? Ooh, 28. Oh, 22%. Just random. Well, why did you get that? Oh, well, 7% outliers. That's fine. So H1 and H3 most consistent. H4 gained ground after H1N1. Definitely show upgrades. And no single piece of evidence reached full linchpin. No, well, you'd need like the smoking gun, wouldn't you? What's that? The silver bullet or smoking gun? We don't have that. So what would you do next? Maybe look at the others, maybe dig into the H1N1 reports. Like you'd kind of like have to garner all that information and feed it back in. So I mean, it wouldn't take days, but and why would that potentially be a useful thing to do? Because then you can predict potentially what we should look out for the next iteration, right? Because then once Grok agrees, because we then have the evidence to prove that they fuck up, they tweak, they test, and they kind of get better. We could then dissect COVID-19, what failed, right? And I mentioned lots of things that failed, like by talking about the things that happened in the UK that failed. So there would be indications of what we would need to be prepared for, or for them to do next time, right? Or what they need to happen in order the next time to be smoother, right? So one of the things they needed to happen for the next one to be smoother is the pandemic treaty, right? And the WHO basically taking over the country. But it was the UK who helped write the pandemic treaty and were like one of the main instigators of the pandemic treaty. So there was no way we were going to opt out. To everybody who was fucking saying, we need to opt out, never actually read who were the people fucking helping create it. Idiots. People just don't fucking even take like 5 minutes to go to the actual pandemic treaty website where it said that in the words. Okay, so backwards check. The core pattern between two bookends remains robust. Treating Fauci as protected asset rather than permanent amounts fits the evidence better than personal direction claims, which is cool. Iterative learning mechanism is currently the cleanest way to reconcile the weaker appearance of 2009 with continuity. Great vulnerability remains. There's still thin positive evidence for deliberate lesson transfer between 2019 and 2020, but also we did have potential Ebola and Zika in between, right? So we jumped from swine flu to COVID, but there was other bits in between. And he's noticed those. So overall assessment confidence. Recurring structural pattern between HIV, bookend, and COVID, moderate to high confidence. Fauci is a long-time protected institutional asset, moderate confidence. Iterative learning. Deliberate refinement across cases, low to moderate, coherent and improved by the 2009 comparison, but requires stronger documentary evidence of intentional lesson transfer. Generic bureaucracy explanation, still fully live and competitive. But then he tells you what you need to do. Okay, so it will be very hard to prove, right? That's the problem. It's very, because, not a whistleblower, don't know any whistleblowers, not involved in any intelligence agencies, have no access to swiped information on the back end because I've got spy software on people's technology or anything like that. So it would be very difficult to prove based on the information we have that there is a conspiracy to depopulate based on vaccinations with the information that's fed in, right? So if I could relocate again the original meeting minutes, but I'm pretty sure they were swiped, and this was before I was kind of just saving everything as a print to PDF. It's in there. That would fundamentally prove it. We also have the 1970s committee where they were talking about, in order for you to do this, you need to line everybody up, jabbing them in the arm. Remember when I introduced that into one of the other threads? But again, these don't carry over, right? So the difference between what an AI, when you go into a fresh thread and you start again, you don't have all the information. That's the difference between an AI doing these things and you doing it, right? Because I remember all of these outside things, which enables me to be like, oh, yeah, here we go again. Whereas you have to tell the AI the information again, and it can only remember 40 things. Like, you can only have 40 bits of evidence. Otherwise, it has a hissy fit. And that may be different on other AI models. That's how many Grok said that he can kind of cope with. After that, he will forget and hallucinate. So it's not worth it. Which is why the matrix will remove things and you can introduce new things, but it just parks things so you can always come back and test things again. But so there's lots of other things I could introduce so that Grok would come on the journey, and we get to the same point where Grok's like, yeah, depopulation plan exists, right? But it's always interesting doing it without that, right? This is why this is really powerful, because without all of that prior knowledge, without any of the kind of proof and evidence that's accumulated, that's out there, just the official reports showcase that hypothesis 1, which wasn't natural, wasn't a bureaucratic fuck up. It was directed, it was purposeful. They were directed in exactly the same way, but with upgrades, is the most plausible explanation for COVID, right? It wasn't a natural event that occurred and then people fucked up, right? Which is what is being pushed, like always being pushed. What we've proven is that's absolutely categorically not the case. It was purposeful and by design. So that's what we've just proven. And Fauci was a useful, purposeful, puppet-based, like, idiot, if you like. So by examining Zika, Ebola, H1N1, especially if you're in the USA, you can use that. You can examine those things. And we drop the thread. You'll have to ignore the beginning though, because I was trying to find out what I should talk about. And then I didn't use any of the things that Grok suggested. So you have to get I just stayed in the same thread. So once you get past Burnham, North Sea oil, things that we're potentially going to speak about. Oh, the rape gang inquiry, the actual government-based rape gang inquiry that is asking to speak to victims, is not being mentioned at all whatsoever. But that I didn't know what I was just like, okay, well, it's only kind of like a passing conversation. That's I can't do a 3-hour podcast on that one statement. Once you get past that, you'll see all the Fauci stuff. And you'll see all the evidence that I uploaded, so you'll be able to access, that's the point. You see everything that I uploaded and where it's all come from. And you see the entire conversation. But then we did this one live. So from start to finish, outside of me just uploading the information, that was 3 hours, right? So you saw the entire process. It doesn't take long. Like, that would take days. It used to take me days to try and figure that shit out. Or by myself. using just Katie brain and cross-referencing and rereading and highlighting and sticky noting, right? Sticky noting stuff. Nowadays you just need to read it and then you can upload it. And you do need to read the information though, because you need to be like, wait a minute, you have analyzed that piece of information completely incorrectly there. So do make sure you kind of have read the stuff before you dive into it. So it was 3 hours compiling this, 3 hours doing the thing, but obviously I'd read a lot of the information in the past already anyway. So, and as you will have noticed, as I was going through, I was veering off, giving you lots of background information, which wasn't obviously in the Grok chat, but also kind of shows that I had lots of prior knowledge about this stuff. So this wasn't brand new. I don't know anything about it. So that will take longer if you have to then go and if you have to go and read the source material first, because I highly recommend knowing about the subject you're going to investigate. So if you need to read the source material first, it's obviously going to take you longer. But if you've read lots of information about something, then this can enable you to stop spiraling out of control, right? Maybe we do Flat Earth next week. Because I just get bored of the narrative, the narrative, right? So this can also help if you are falling down rabbit holes. It can help bring you back in, or confirm, right, that you were right. I have looked at Flat Earth stuff. I don't believe it's flat. So maybe I'll find out it is flat, right? Maybe that's what we'll discover. Okay. So I will write it down, because otherwise by the time it gets to next week, I'll be like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. So let's do Flat Earth next week, just for shit and giggles. Shits and giggles, right? Flat Earth. But just prepare. I mean, if I'm wrong, right, I'm quite happy to be like, okay, the earth is flat, let's go. Because if you're going to use it, then at least use it to expand your capacity to think you're intelligent. That's the point, right? It's about not just blindly believing information, but stress testing the information, and then if you're wrong, you're wrong. Right? So far, I have been right every single fucking time. And even when Grok says, no, Ebola is not a psyop. And I went, He's like, it was the Ebola one. The Ebola one's the only one he says, it's not a psyop. You're wrong, Kate. And I said, okay, tell me what I need to look for to make my hop over the next 7 days. And then I plugged all that information in, and within 7 days, it was 67%. Yeah, you were right. Right? So sometimes I'm just ahead of the curve because we can see it coming, right? We know what they're doing, and we just haven't got the evidence that they're doing it yet. But Flat Earth, I don't think, unless somebody comes out with a brand new theory, right? Unless there's some brand new evidence that comes out in 6 months, I think we've pretty much got access to stuff. So on that note, you may need to send me your best Flat Earth stuff, okay? and I will spend the next few days, if it's in YouTube podcast based format, that is more helpful because I can have that on in the background while I am, cleaning, walking the dogs, doing those type of things. It'd be very difficult if you handed me a 300-page document, I'm not going to be able to read it. So, but if you've got if there's like a YouTube documentary or something that like convinced you, like it was just like, oh my God, like you'd been on the edge, or maybe you didn't believe it, right? Maybe you were just like it's just bullshit. And then like they presented the evidence, right? Send it my way. And you X or Telegram is probably the best way to get it to me. If you send it on YouTube, I probably won't see it. I don't think you can send me stuff on YouTube. I think it blocks links. I don't know. Yeah, Telegram or X. Be like, I'm gonna get like flat earth spammed. It's fine, right? And I may not get round to all of it because I do have like to earn money. I have to like job stuff. This is my fun stuff. So I will try, and if it's YouTube stuff, I can kind of watch it in the background. That's fine. And then I can kind of go through stuff next Monday. I get like the Monday day to kind of like have a hunt. So thank you so much. Or if like, so we could even do like fully interactive, right? So I can bring people on for conversations. So I could always like run all the stuff in the background and we can just run through the matrix. Okay, so Edwin, I'm guessing you are okay, so Edwin's for it. That's cool. I'm not au fait enough to have a conversation with you, but you feel free to send me the things that convinced you, and then if like you want to come on, and you don't have to show your face, but you could potentially help refine because we can do, if we do the matrix stuff live, you can help refine where Grok kind of goes wrong, like he went wrong with my hypothesis there, right? I mean, feel free to just type fast, but you're more than welcome to come on, like mix it up a bit. So anyway, send me like not like 12 hours worth of like I'm not going to get the time to watch it. So but if you got something like an hour and a half that you think would give me a good overview and understanding, cool. If you've got some, whiz it over. People have sent me stuff before and I've just stress tested it and found it wanting, but I haven't seen everything, right? And okay, so full disclosure, I stress tested it, found it wanting, came to the conclusion it actually isn't going to benefit me in any way, shape or form to know whether it is or not, right? And at the time we were going through COVID, so it was really important that I dedicated all my time not to the fun like rabbit holes, but actually to figuring the COVID shit out and helping people lawfully circumvent mask mandates and stuff like that. Absolutely. And that's the other thing, like so there's loads of stuff I would love to know the answers to, like but one, you have to decide, is it going to impact my life now? I mean, I don't think my life will change if I find out that it's flat, like in any way, shape or form. And that was kind of the conclusion I came to. Like, it's not going to change my life, but right now people are potentially going to die from vaccines. And then I just never went back to it because I'd already decided, I think the Earth's round. I just think it's stupid. I'm being honest, right? I'm where I am. And then next week, who knows? I'll be like, oh my God, I was so stupid. Like, I will change my mind. I'm like open to opening 2020, didn't believe in aliens. 100% on board with the aliens right now, right? Who knows? I might change my mind again. 2019, Trump was evil. 2020, pretty sure he's like a really fucking good, solid guy. Still stand there that he's a pretty good, solid guy, surrounded by snakes. So I'm open to change my mind, and publicly. So, but yeah, unless Elon gives me a rocket, I ain't never gonna know a ship. So thank you so much for joining me. Have yourselves an amazing rest of your Monday, a super week, and I shall see you next week for Flat Earth. I'm really kind of excited now. Providing this is not like some fucking major emergency that we need to discuss, but I doubt it. It's because we're already kind of ahead of we're waiting for the world to catch up at the moment. So have an amazing week, and I'll see you soon.